Chapter 609. Dean waited for Aisha to finish killing the knights. He used the metal stick in his arms to hit the ground. The sound caught Aisha's attention. Her beautiful face was full of ferociousness as she rushed towards Dean. Dean raised his hand and pointed to the front. Aisha looked at the direction of Dean's hand. She revealed a bloodthirsty killing intent once again. She rushed towards the castle with the Mel family's flag. "Who is it? Not good!" Screams and screams echoed. The knights who were guarding outside the castle were powerless in front of Aisha. Since Aisha had adapted to the Tomain, her strength had returned to its original peak state. Moreover, because of the undead transformation, she would never be affected by physical consumption or injuries. Soon, Aisha killed the knights and crashed into the castle. Screams and screams echoed from inside the castle. Dean stood outside the castle and looked up. His eyes narrowed as he jumped to the window on the second floor. He grabbed the rough rock and jumped to the balcony on the third floor. Several people in the room noticed the movement on the balcony and rushed over. When the curtain covering the balcony was lifted by a few people, a leg kicked out from the middle. A refined young man standing in the middle was immediately sent flying. His chest caved in, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He died on the spot. Several people wearing knights' armors were aghast as they saw the scene. Although they had weapons in their hands, they didn't dare to attack. The youth who was kicked wasn't an ordinary person. He was a knight from the Holy Church who was invited by the Mel family. Who would have thought that such a person wouldn't be able to react and would be kicked to death by Dean on the spot? Dean walked into the room. He looked indifferent as he glanced at the bed in the room. He saw a haggard and pale, middle-aged man lying on the bed. He was the current head of the Mel family, Mark. This business legend who once stirred up the business district was now lying here, with two doctors in white coats standing next to him and a priest holding a Bible blessing chapter in his hand. Everyone in the room was shocked as they looked at the motionless youth on the ground. It was hard to imagine that there would be such a person in the outer wall. He could kill a knight of the Holy Church at such a young age. Moreover, it was a one-hit kill. The room was deathly silent. Suddenly, the miserable screams from downstairs reached everyone's ears. Everyone's faces grew unsightly. They knew that the person who had attacked them in the night was not alone. Who are you?" "This is the territory of the Mel family." A middle-aged knight bravely stopped in front of Dean and said. Dean indifferently looked at him and waved his hand. In the eyes of the middle-aged knight, Dean's hand was like a shadow. It was difficult for him to react. He raised his weapon to block. Bang! His hand hit the weapon. The middle-aged knight felt as if his weapon was hit by a hammer. The strong force made his hands numb. He retreated a few steps and almost fell down. Dean waved his hand to repel the man, but did not look at him. Instead, he walked step by step towards the bed. The two doctors and the priest who were standing next to the bed trembled and retreated to the side. The priest was an older man, perhaps in his 60s. His hand trembled, and the book in his hand fell to the ground with a thud. Everyone else in the room was shocked, and their hearts began to pound. The priest's face turned pale. He didn't know whether to retreat or to pick up the book. Dean went straight to the bed and slowly sat down. He looked at the unconscious Mark. He raised his hand and patted Mark's sparse cheek. "Wake up." Mark woke up in a daze. He struggled to open his eyes. He saw a familiar face in front of him. Was it the youth? Am I still dreaming? Thinking this, he closed his eyes again. Dean patted Mark's face again. "Wake up." It was as if it was a normal thing to wake someone up. Mark frowned as he struggled to open his eyes. He saw the face in front of him again. He was a little annoyed. Suddenly, he saw the doctor and the other knights. He couldn't help but be startled. Was it a dream? He stared again, blinked, and finally saw the scene in the room clearly. He couldn't help but be stunned. "Patriarch, don't you recognize me?" Dean looked at him. Mark was alarmed. His complexion changed as he hurriedly turned his head to look around. He even forgot about the pain in his body. "Your baby daughter is still here." Dean slowly said, "Patriarch, don't be nervous. It's not good for your body. I'll have to trouble you to move to a place and come with me." Mark reacted. He looked at Dean. "What do you want to do?" "This is the Mel family. You dare to openly attack a noble? Do you want to be the enemy of everyone? So what if I have to be the enemy of everyone? Dean calmly replied. Mark was startled. Dean turned to look at the two doctors. What's wrong with Mr. Mel? The two doctors heard the screams from downstairs. They were scared to death. They rushed to answer as they saw Dean looking at them. It's Nola disease. Is he going to die? Dean asked. He needs to meditate and then cooperate with treatment to have a chance to live. Dean said, both of you keep Mr. Mel's life. If something happens to Mr. Mel, then you'll be buried with him. Do you understand? Both of them were in cold sweat. They nodded like chickens pecking rice. Bang! At this time, the door was knocked open. The smell of blood poured into the room. There was a bloody figure standing in the doorway. He looked like a devil from hell. The incessant screams outside also disappeared at this moment. Everyone in the room stepped back in fear. They looked at the bloody figure in horror. Dean stood up and stood in front of the two doctors. Whoosh! Aisha roared as she rushed towards the knights. In the blink of an eye, the knights were torn apart and killed by Aisha. Their internal organs and intestines were scattered on the ground. Blood splashed all over the exquisite decorations in the room. Dean snapped his fingers. Aisha's body stopped. Her shoulders slightly trembled as if she was trying to restrain herself. Dean looked at the two doctors. You wait here. Someone will pick you up soon. Don't worry, as I won't kill doctors. When the two doctors heard Dean's words, their hearts that were tightly gripped by fear were slightly relieved. But they were worried that Dean would not keep his words, so they were still very nervous. Dean walked towards Aisha. He held her cold and slender hand and walked out of the room step by step. He walked along the corridor, which was full of corpses. He left the castle and came to the gate of the Mel family's manor. He stood with Aisha in the night. He took out a handkerchief and wiped the bloodstains on Aisha's cheeks. Aisha was expressionless, but the corners of her mouth were still slightly curled, revealing a somewhat sinister expression. The sound of footsteps echoed in the distance after Dean wiped the blood on her face. Gwyneth took the lead and rushed to this place at full speed. She was followed by a large group of people who occupied the spacious street. It was a majestic scene. Gwyneth was surprised when she saw Dean and Aisha waiting at the door. She sped up and saw Aisha, who was standing next to Dean. Aisha was covered in blood, especially her palms. The blood was still fresh and was slowly dripping down. Gwyneth's face changed as she remembered the scene of Aisha biting the corpses of the soldiers. There was a trace of inexplicable tension in her heart. She looked at Dean. Master, we are here. Dean indifferently said as he wiped his palms with a handkerchief. Almost all the masters inside are dead. Take some people to deal with the rest. Also call Sergei to bring the father and daughter of the Mel family. Gwyneth was startled. Her eyes couldn't help but look at the huge manor behind Dean. It was brightly lit, but it seemed particularly quiet. She could only hear faint sobbing sounds. She was shocked. This was a big aristocratic family. How could they be massacred by Dean alone? Did you hear me? Dean frowned as he saw that she didn't answer. Gwyneth responded, Yes, master. She thought of something and asked, What about the rest of the people? Chapter 6:10. Gwyneth hesitated for a moment before replying, Yes, young master. Then she turned around and waved her hand, leading the troops to rush into the manor. The group of over 1,000 people was like a black tide, surging into every corner of the manor. In an instant, screams and cries sounded from every corner of the manor, and the smell of blood quietly spread out. Only the night was silent. Sergei carried Sarah and Mel, who were unconscious, to the outside of the manor. Glenn escorted Mark and two doctors out of the manor. Mark wasn't in a coma. His body was tied to the bed, and he couldn't struggle. When he was carried outside the manor, he suddenly saw Dean standing quietly in the night. His eyes were like fire, and his face was red with anger. He roared, You bastard, you should go to hell. Dean slowly turned around and indifferently looked at him. Mr. Mel, how does it feel to see your clansmen die? Damn beast. Mark angrily stared at him. You are not a human. You'll be judged one day. You will never be able to wash away your sins. You deserve to die. Dean indifferently smiled. Who doesn't have a little sin in this world? God can't judge me, let alone a human. Mark clenched his fists in anger. His chest was in pain as he used too much force. He couldn't help but cough out blood. Dean indifferently said, "Take him away." "Yes." Glenn nodded. She called the two mercenaries who were carrying the bed to take Mark away. Gwyneth returned from the manor. She was followed by a team of mercenaries who were escorting a large number of people dressed as servants. Some of them were old, weak women and children. Gwyneth came in front of Dean. "Master, what should we do with these people?" Dean glanced at the people she escorted. "Didn't I say not to leave the remnants of the Mel family?" Gwyneth replied, "Master, these people aren't members of the Mel family. They're just hired servants. They are ordinary people. Are you sure that they don't have feelings for the Mel family?" Dean indifferently looked at her. Gwyneth was stunned. "The master is dead. As a servant, shouldn't I be buried with my master?" Dudeen coldly said. Gwyneth bit her lips. She knew that Dudeen was determined to kill her. She turned around and made a beheading gesture. Some of the servants were sharp-eyed. They cried and begged as they heard Dean's words. They cursed the Mel family and wanted to disassociate themselves from the Mel family. When the mercenaries saw Gwyneth's gesture, they immediately pulled out their weapons. In an instant, the rest of the escorted servants panicked and fell to the ground, begging for mercy. Seeing this sad scene, Gwyneth couldn't help but close her eyes. Puff, puff, puff. The sound of metal blades cutting flesh was heard one after another. Blood spurted out and sputtered. Some of the people who were close enough to Gwyneth's smooth cheeks had a trace of heat. She slowly opened her eyes and saw that the servants in front of her were beheaded one after another. Blood flowed like a river, and heads were everywhere. The rest of the servants were desperately crying and begging for mercy. Soon, all the pleading voices disappeared, and the ground was littered with corpses and the cries of babies. Gwyneth quickly went over to the corpses of the servants and ordered people to pick them up. She turned around and brought them back to Dean. She was about to speak when she heard Dean's indifferent voice. "What do you want to say?" Gwyneth couldn't help but say, "Master, these children are innocent. Can you let them go?" "Innocent?" Dean coldly looked at her. "Adults who have survived for decades have been killed. Don't you think it's ridiculous that you feel pity for these children? Or do you think that these children are innocent and have never done bad things? Do you think that it's too cruel to kill them?" Gwyneth was startled. She did think so. Dean sneered as he saw her expression. "These children haven't done bad things. It's not because they are kind, but because they don't have the ability. Once they grow up, they will be like ordinary people. What qualifications do they have to enjoy the privilege of being exempted from death? You think that it's cruel? It's just a conditioned reflex caused by your vision, hearing, and imagination." Gwyneth was speechless as she didn't know how to refute. But she knew that such behavior was wrong. But she couldn't say what was wrong. "If we leave these bastards alive today, they will become the most disgusting rats in 10 years. Resources are limited. The resources that they will eat and drink will be left to the slums. It will be enough to feed many families who will die of hunger and poverty." Dean said in a cold voice, "If you don't have the heart to kill them, then you can leave first." Gwyneth was silent. She used to be a punisher in the inner wall. She was specialized in hunting down evil followers and hunters. Although she was framed and imprisoned by the nobles, but she only hated certain people. However, everything she'd done today had truly exceeded her bottom line intolerance, and it caused her to feel an indescribable feeling of rage and powerlessness. She knew that she was unable to change this young man's thoughts, and it was even to the extent that if she were to oppose him too strongly, she might even be discarded by this young man as a pawn at the side. But was it really right to witness and connive at such a sinful scene in order to protect herself? She slightly bit her lips and raised her hand to make a gesture to the mercenaries. The mercenaries immediately waved their swords and killed the children who were just born to 4 or 5 years old. The ground was a mess. The blood spread like a curse and permeated the dark ground. At this time, Sarah and Lisa slowly woke up. They saw Sergei and Dean not far from him. Sarah was about to scold them when she smelled a strong and pungent smell of blood. Her face slightly changed as she looked up and saw corpses everywhere. She was stunned for a moment. She stared at Dean. You won't die a good death? You are not a human. You are an ugly monster. You deserve to die. Dean frowned and slightly raised his hand to signal. Sergei understood and immediately chopped Sarah's hand and knocked her out again. Dean waited for Glenn to come back and said, We will go back first. You stay here and clean up the place. Remember to kill even a mouse. Glenn nodded, understood. Chapter 6:11. As soon as Mostyn came out of the tavern, he saw his favorite subordinate rushing towards him. He said drunkenly, Martin, how many times have I told you that as a priest, you have to be calm? Deacon, it's not good. Martin was very anxious. Something big has happened in Black Harbor Town. Mostyn slightly shook his head and hiccuped. Black Harbor Town? What could have happened there? Can you speak slowly? Cough. Martin hurriedly said, Recently, the nobles who moved to Crow Town, Mel family had an accident. It seems that they were massacred. Bang! The bottle in Mostyn's hand suddenly fell to the ground. His drunken eyes widened as he sobered up. The Mel family was massacred? What happened? Martin replied, I don't know the specifics of the situation. The higher-ups told us to rush over to investigate. Let's go. Mostyn immediately strode towards the carriage parked on the roadside. Let's go to Black Harbor Town. The speed of the carriage was very fast. After half an hour, they arrived in front of the Mel family's manor in Black Harbor Town. A large number of knights and magistrate had surrounded the place to protect the scene. Although it was almost 9 o'clock, but there was still a large number of people gathered around. Mostyn got off the carriage and was greeted by a knight of magistrate. Sir Mostyn, you finally came. Mostyn slightly frowned. He smelled a strong smell of blood as he got off the carriage. His heart sank as he walked. What happened? Tell me in detail. The knight of magistrate replied, We received a report from the Victor family that someone had attacked the Mel family. When we arrived, the attackers had already left. The people of the Mel family are all dead. Mostyn's footsteps paused as he stared at the knight. All dead. The knight of magistrate bitterly nodded. Yes, all dead. M.O. Stein's eyes flashed as he continued walking forward. Did you find out the identity of the attacker from the enemy's corpse? Knight of the magistrate hesitated and whispered. The enemy didn't leave any corpses. They should have been taken away when they retreated. But I heard from passers-by that a large number of people passed by the street half an hour ago. I have sent people to trace the footprints. There should be news soon. Musing snorted. They dare to attack Mel family at night. Needless to say, there are a lot of them. At this time, he had arrived at the cordon of the judicial knights. He looked up and was stunned. Inside the cordoned area, a few lanterns illuminated the corpses strewn all over the ground. The ground was covered in blood, as though it was a living hell. His expression changed, and he jumped into the cordon. While paying attention to his own footsteps, he took out a handkerchief to cover his mouth and scanned the corpses all over the ground. Soon, his expression changed again, and he was furious. Killed. So many of them. Looking at the corpses on the ground, Martin's face turned pale, especially the corpses of some small children. He clenched his fists and said indignantly, Bastards, they don't even let children off. Knight of the magistrate sighed. Yes, I've been a knight of the magistrate for many years, but this is the first time I have seen such a bloody scene. The main culprit of this incident has a deep hatred towards Mel family. I have investigated and found that no one was alive at the scene. Whether it was the elderly or the children, they were all killed. The murderer is utterly heartless. Martin angrily said, It's more than heartless. This is simply not what a human would do. You are wrong. M.O. Stein stared at the corpses all over the ground. This is what a human would do. Dean sat on the sofa and asked Gabriel to brew a pot of tea. It didn't take long for Glenn and Gwyneth to come back. How is it? Have the mercenaries settled down? Dean asked. Glenn nodded. Everything is settled. The magistrate won't be able to track us for a while, but there are too many people involved in this operation. It will take a long time for them to find us. What should we do next? Dean replied, It's their bad luck that they found us. Glenn was startled. Dean turned to look at Sarah and Mel, who were lying unconscious on the floor. He poured a cup of hot tea over them. Both of them were immediately awakened by the tea. They sat up in shock. "Beast, what do you want?" Sarah quickly looked around. She knew that they had arrived at Dean's castle. Her face was ugly, but she was weak inside. Dean indifferently said, "Nothing. I have said that I will give you a surprise when you wake up. Do you know how many people from Mel family died tonight?" Sarah's face changed as she angrily stared at him. "You madman." Dean continued as if he didn't hear her. "I don't know. But I do know how many people from your family survived tonight. You, your little maid, your father, and 2 doctors. A total of 5. Well, Sarah's pretty face turned pale as she heard Dean's words. Her lips trembled as she asked, What did you do to the others?" "Of course I killed them," Dean said. "Did you invite them for tea?" Sarah felt an unspeakable grief welled up in her heart. She stared at Dean. "Even if I die, I will curse you. I will wait for you in hell." Sarah stared at Dean. "Even if I die, I will curse you. I will wait for you in hell. Then you'll have to wait." Dean calmly said, "Do you know why I left you alive?" Sarah stared at him with resentment. There was a trace of disdain in her eyes as she sneered. "Why? Don't you want to know all the properties of Mel family? You are wrong. No matter how you treat me, I won't tell you even half a word. Maybe I will tell you the wrong information. You better not believe my words." "I've never believed you." Dean said, "You think too highly of yourself. I kept you alive because I want to retaliate against you. I just want you to taste the most painful and desperate things in the world. I have said that I will repay my enemies 100 times. Shouldn't I do what I say?" Sarah was startled. Chapter 6:12. Gwyneth's mind was still immersed in the previous massacre. The bloody picture repeatedly echoed in her mind. She couldn't help but clench her fists whenever she thought of the faces of the children who fell in the pool of blood. There was a kind of regret, but helplessness in her heart. She was startled when she heard Dean call her name. She looked up and saw Dean's dark eyes. She nodded, "Yes, young master." Gwyneth looked at Sarah and Lisa, who were lying in front of Dean. There was a trace of coldness in her eyes. If these people didn't provoke Dean, then the innocent servants and children wouldn't have died. Ever since she was framed and imprisoned, she didn't have a good impression of the nobles. She replied in a cold voice, "Master, as far as I know, all the nobles in the outer wall are servants expelled from the inner wall. In addition to Dean, Sergei, Glenn, Gabriel, Mason, and the others were stunned. They were born and raised in the outer wall, so the status of aristocracy in their hearts had long been ingrained. They were as noble as the royal family in the old era. However, the royal family were just servants." Sarah and Lisa froze. After a while, Sarah reacted and angrily stared at her. "What did you say? You lowly commoner. You dare to blaspheme a noble? Do you think that I will believe you? You will die a horrible death." Sarah and Lisa were stunned for a moment. Gwyneth indifferently glanced at her. "It doesn't matter if you believe it or not. The outer wall has always been called wild land by the inner wall. It means that the people who live in the outer wall don't understand human etiquette and upbringing. It's just like how the people of the outer wall call the barbarians in the radiation area. In the eyes of the people of the inner wall, the people of the outer wall are no different from barbarians." Sarah stared at her and couldn't speak. Gwyneth continued, "The ancestors of the aristocrats of the outer wall were servants of the real aristocrats of the inner wall. They had learned etiquette from the real aristocrats, so their words and actions had aristocratic style. Over time, they felt that they were superior to the commoners. However, many of the senior servants who had been cultivated by the aristocrats were too arrogant and had offended their masters. So they were expelled from the inner wall and ended up in the wild land of the outer wall. Therefore, the nobles of the outer wall are fake. They are only known as nobles in the household register. They don't dare to title themselves." Sergei, Glenn, and others were dumbfounded as they heard Gwyneth's words. They knew that Gwyneth wasn't lying. They knew that Gwyneth was a proud girl. She disdained to lie. Moreover, she was from the inner wall, so most of the information she told them was true. However, This news was really shocking. They didn't expect that the noble who was in awe of them was just a servant of the true nobles of the inner wall. Moreover, he was expelled because of his mistakes. Such people were self-proclaimed as nobles in the outer wall. They enjoyed privileges that ordinary civilians couldn't get. Thinking of this, Sergei, Glenn, and the others felt a little ridiculous and ironic. Sarah stared at her. "You're lying? It's not like that. It's absolutely not like that. We nobles were expelled from the outer wall because we violated the taboo. But we are not servants. Our ancestors were real nobles, but they were deprived of their titles. You see, I have blonde hair. I have blonde hair? This is the hair color of the aristocrats. Do you know that? Do you know that?" She grabbed her slightly curly blonde hair and shook it. She was very excited as she looked at everyone. Indeed, blonde hair had always been the symbol of aristocracy. It couldn't be faked. Duddian calmly raised his hand to signal Gwyneth to continue. Gwyneth looked down at Sarah. "Blonde hair is the hair color of the aristocrats. It is the same in the inner wall. Half of you have aristocratic blood because your ancestors were the closest servants of the aristocrats. Some of them were appreciated by the aristocrats and married to the aristocrats. So you have half of the aristocratic genes and are considered as half aristocrats. But it's just a bloodline. It's nothing. The symbol of aristocracy is the title. Without the title, you are nothing. No matter how brilliant your blonde hair is, you are still a civilian. There is nothing special about it." Sarah Mel fiercely stood up and said, "You're talking nonsense. I have aristocratic blood. I'm different from you. You are jealous of me. How can you understand the nobility of aristocratic blood?" Gwyneth slightly frowned. She was about to say something, but Duddian opened his mouth. "It seems that Miss Sarah doesn't want to hear the truth. Yes, the reality is always dazzling. You have to rely on your eyes to see the reality, but you have to rely on your brain to imagine the beautiful things." Sarah turned her head and stared at him. "If you want to kill, then kill. Why do you talk so much nonsense? Death is a liberation, but not a torture." Duddian indifferently said, "Sergei, I leave the rest to you. Remember, don't kill them. I want to keep them to relieve my boredom when I am in a bad mood." Sergei respectfully replied, "Yes, young master. Thank you, young master." Duddian waved his hand. "Go." Sergei grinned and grabbed Sarah's shoulder. His other hand hugged Lisa and said, "Two little girls, come with me. Uncle Sergei will let you taste what it's like to be a woman." Sarah's eyes were full of fear as she struggled. "Beast, let go of me. You lowly commoner. Let go of me." Sergei didn't care as he took both of them straight upstairs. When Gwyneth and Glenn saw this scene, they immediately knew what would happen to the two of them. They looked at Duddian, who was sitting on the sofa. They felt that the boy was very different from before. At this time, the sound of horse hooves echoed from outside. Very quickly, a few figures rushed into the hall. It was Nicholas and the few attendants he brought with him. Nicholas was relieved as he saw everyone in the hall. "Master, the cultivation base has been taken back." Duddian nodded. "Good job and very efficient." Nicholas replied, "Master is overpraising us, but what?" Nicholas hesitated. "Although the cultivation base has been taken back, but I believe that it won't take long for Mel family to get the news. They will send people to attack us. We won't be the opponent of Mel family if we have Glenn, Gwyneth, or Sergei there. Then we might be able to defend the cultivation base." Nicholas hesitated for a moment. "Don't worry." Hearing his words, Glenn, Macon, and others looked at him strangely. Nicholas's heart skipped a beat as he noticed the strange expression on everyone's face. "Master, did I say something wrong?" Duddian shook his head. Nicholas was puzzled and wanted to ask again. Glenn said, "You don't have to worry about it. The Mel family will disappear from the outer wall from tonight onwards." Nicholas was stunned. Disappear from the outer wall? What the hell is going on? Glenn immediately told him about how Dean led them to slaughter the Mel family after he left. Nicholas was stunned. Blood washed the Mel family. Yes, Glenn nodded. Nicholas was stunned as he looked at Duddian. He had just recaptured the cultivation base, but Duddian had destroyed the Mel family? The Mel family was one of the oldest aristocratic families. Although they were in decline, but there were countless knights and masters employed by the family. How could they be destroyed by Dudeen in such a short period of time? Dean got up and said, "Since the cultivation base has been recaptured, then manage it well. I will be using it in the near future. Also hire people to expand the cultivation base. There is no upper limit to the area. Invest as much money as you can." He turned and went upstairs. Nicotine was stunned. He retracted his eyes as Aisha disappeared from the corner of the building. At this time, he heard a woman scream coming from one of the rooms upstairs. He was surprised that someone dared to do such a thing when Dean was angry. He immediately asked Glenn, and Glenn immediately told him about Sergei's matter. Nicholas was lost in thought as he listened. Master's temperament has changed a lot. Glenn sighed. I used to think that he was a very smart and warm-hearted person. I didn't expect that after a few years his murderous aura would get heavier and heavier. Nicholas nodded. He has changed a lot this time. Glenn shook her head. It's a pity that those two women offended him. I felt that he would have great achievements in the future when he was just a primary hunter. Unfortunately, the Mel family didn't know how to appreciate talents. Otherwise, they would have sheltered him from the Thornflower prison. He would have pledged his loyalty to the Mel family, and the Mel family would have given birth to a senior hunter. The Mel family would have entered the inner wall soon. It's a pity, sad, lamentable, and hateful. It's just a mistake. She couldn't help but shake her head and sigh. Nicholas said, "You can't blame them. Hunters aren't welcomed by the Mel family." Glenn sighed. But if he brought them back, it shouldn't be as simple as revenge. Nicholas narrowed his eyes. Glenn was surprised as she looked at the old man. What do you mean? Master is smarter than all of us think. He would never do something without a return unless he hates the Mel family. Nicholas slowly said. Glenn looked at him. She knew that he had been in contact with Dudeen for a longer time than her, so he had a thorough understanding of the boy. His eyes were dark. That night, the members of the magistrate and the branch of the Radiant Church in the vicinity of Crow Harbor Town were woken up one after another. A piece of sensational news spread like wildfire to all the major powers, as well as all the major newspapers. Countless people were awakened from their sleep and busy with their work. "Deacon, wake up. There's a big case." How many times have I told you not to disturb my sleep, even if there's a big case? Talk about it tomorrow. Deacon, something happened to the nobles. What? Magistrates and knights of the magistrate quickly rushed to the town. They were doomed to be sleepless tonight. The next day, the headlines of the major newspapers published sensational news. The Mel family that temporarily resided in the small town of Wugang was exterminated last night. There was no news of the patriarch Mark and his daughter Sarah Mel. It was unknown whether they were alive or dead. Looking at the news published in the newspaper, Dean took a sip of his breakfast milk. At the same time, in another majestic palace, a handsome young man saw the headlines on the newspaper and immediately gripped the newspaper tightly. His eyes turned red as he roared angrily towards the sky and tore the newspaper in his hand into pieces. The news would make some people happy, but it would inevitably make some people unhappy. The nobles of Scott Consortium, Huashan Consortium, and other major consortiums were shocked when they saw the sensational news. Although the Mel family was banned by Dean, but there was no news about the legendary genius. The Mel family had been hiding their strength and development. Although they weren't in their heyday, but they were comparable to the first-class nobles. It was incredible that they were captured overnight. The whereabouts of Mark and his daughter were unknown. They didn't need to think to know that they had fallen into the hands of the villains. There was no difference whether they were dead or alive. There was a magnificent and solemn hall under a manor in Dexing Town. At the moment, there were 7 or 8 figures sitting in a room. They were led by a middle-aged man in a black robe. He angrily slapped the table. "Look at this. Mel family has been destroyed in Dexing Town. Why didn't you receive the news until now? Are you waiting for the enemy to attack the headquarters of the 12th District? Are you still dreaming?" The rest of the people kept quiet out of fear and did not make a sound. Our dark church has been reduced to reading the newspaper to know what is happening outside. Have you been staying underground for too long? Have you forgotten that we live on the surface? The middle-aged man angrily said. No one dared to say a word. Mel family had just cooperated with us, but they were destroyed. It's been a long time since we got the news. We don't even know who the murderer is. How can I explain this matter to the speaker? The middle-aged man angrily said. One of them hesitated for a while. Elder, most of the people who can exterminate the Mel family are enemies with them. Perhaps they are enemies with us too. As long as we follow this point, I believe that we will soon know who did it. Chapter 6:13. Master, the news about the Mel family is spread outside. I'm afraid we won't be able to hide it for long. Nicholas gritted his teeth and went to Dudien's room. There are too many interests involved in the Mel family. Now that they have been massacred, most of the hatred will be transferred to the murderer. Last night, I happened to rob the cultivation base. This matter will soon be noticed. Dean flipped through the book and said slowly, How fast is very fast? Nicotine calculated for a moment and said seriously, Within 2 days, they will definitely find out that it was us. 2 days is enough. Dean turned a page and indifferently said, After 2 days, no one will continue to pay attention to this matter. Nicotine was startled. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the elders' meeting. Shoot Wolf had already prepared a suit personally made by a master tailor. His stooped figure looked energetic. He combed his hair in front of the mirror and fastened his tie. Looking at himself in the mirror, he looked like an aristocrat, and he was very satisfied. In order to make himself look more like an evil elder of the Dark Church, he tried to imitate some of the habits of the elders of the Dark Church, such as extravagance, wealth, cold-bloodedness, brutality, and temperament. He grasped these aspects perfectly. He was a natural pretender. Elder, you seem to be in a very good mood today. Hawkeye came to the room and was ready to pick him up. He saw the smile on Shooting Wolf's face. I'll be in a good mood as long as I can smell the blood. Shooting Wolf smiled. He picked up his crutches and went straight out of the room. There was a trace of expectation in his eyes. He had been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. In the past few months, he had been the elder of the 9th region. He had been thinking about this time every day. He had secretly informed the Pope about the location of the elders' meeting and the number of people present. All the information had been passed to the Pope. He believed that the Pope would not miss this excellent opportunity. He would send the strongest force of the Holy Church to wipe out the evil believers in one fell swoop. At that time, he would be recorded in the history of the Holy Church. He would leave a glorious mark. At his age, he no longer had much of a desire for material things, including power. It was difficult for him to be moved, but to be famous throughout the ages was what he looked forward to and desired the most. What kind of luxurious enjoyment would it be to be remembered by people after death? When all the elders are caught in one fell swoop, only the mysterious Dark Speaker will be left. The Dark Church will collapse today. The Dark Church that has been opposing the Holy Church for more than 200 years will collapse because of me. Shooting Wolf thought to himself. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up. Soon, surrounded by Hawkeye and other counselors, Abel came to a luxurious carriage in the manor and sat down. On both sides of the carriage were dark knights and 2 dark head knight captains. They would personally escort Abel to the meeting. Let's go. Shooting Wolf instructed after they got into the carriage. Eagle Eye saw that he was about to leave and said, Elder, are you not going to wait for that person? Shoot Wolf knew who that person was. He couldn't help but recall the powerful strength from the previous fight. He squinted his eyes and said, No need. Didn't he already know the location of the elders' meeting? Maybe they went there directly. Let's go first and meet up with them when we get there. Eagle Eye wanted to say something, but eventually held back. The team set off once again. The Dark Knights outside the carriage had a cold aura. No one dared to approach. Fillin Town. This was the territory of the Fillin family. 100 years ago, there was a female general called Fillin. She repeatedly made great achievements in the battle against the barbarians. She killed countless barbarians and saved tens of thousands of civilians. Because of her illustrious achievements, she was awarded this town. Now, the female general had long passed away. Her descendants followed the example of their ancestors and joined the army. There were many outstanding generals in the family, which made the Philin family a big family comparable to the Mel family. However, the Philin family was an aristocrat, so they weren't recruited by consortiums. They were only loyal to the military. Anyone who mentioned the Philin family in the military was afraid of them. Shooting Wolf's carriage slowly entered Philin town. This town was respected by countless civilians. It was the gathering point of the elders' meeting. There was no other reason but because it was the safest place. Shooting Wolf lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked at the scenery on the side of the road. His eyes slightly narrowed as he revealed a bit of coldness. A good hero doesn't want to join the Dark Church and become the dog of the Dark Speaker. Humph! His Highness the Pope should contact the military and take this opportunity to uproot the Philin family. There should be people in the military who are jealous of this general family. The carriage slowly came to a high mountain behind the town. There was a castle far away from the hustle and bustle of the town. The bluegrass flag of the Philin family was inserted on all four sides. Teams of knights were patrolling outside the castle. The path leading to the castle was filled with the fragrance of flowers and grass. The grass was trimmed. Occasionally, hares could be seen running on the grass. Children were playing on the grass. Shooting Wolf lifted the curtain and saw the children playing on the grass. He noticed that they were wearing clothes embroidered with bluegrass patterns. They were the children of the Philin family. Poor children. There was a trace of pity in Shooting Wolf's eyes as he looked at the innocent, smiling faces of the children. These children hadn't done anything bad yet. They probably didn't know what kind of disaster they would be involved in. Soon, the carriage arrived in front of the castle of the Philin family. The carriage was stopped. Shooting Wolf took out the invitation card from his pocket and handed it to a dark knight outside the window. After reading the invitation card, the guard glanced at the knights on both sides of the carriage and said, "The family has ordered that each invitation card can only bring 10 people." Shooting Wolf frowned. He thought for a moment and immediately called a dark knight. "You pick a few good knights and the rest stay outside the castle. Don't go too far." "Yes." Tamaka nodded and turned around to pick a few dark knights. "Please." The guard opened the heavy gate of the castle and made an inviting gesture. Shooting Wolf saw that even a little guard had such a temperament. He secretly respected the Philin family, but at the same time, he felt a little regretful. They could have been heroes, but they had to fall into the darkness. After entering the castle, Shooting Wolf said to Tamaka, who was outside the window, "You stay here. If that person comes, you stay here and wait for him." Tamaka was a little startled, but he quickly responded, "It's the previous show." Shooting Wolf made a gesture and slightly glared at him. "It's fine as long as you know." "Why did you say it out loud?" Tilmark knew that he'd made a slip of the tongue, and he scratched his head. He quickly thought of something and said, "Elder, they don't have an invitation, so it's useless for me to welcome them here. We've already brought in 10 people, and the guards will probably not let them in." This, Shooting Wolf saw how simple Tamaka was and couldn't help but shake his head. "It's their problem. We've done our duty anyway." Tamaka finally reacted and said with a bitter smile, "I know." Tamaka stopped his horse by the door and watched the carriage enter the castle. He got off the horse and squatted by the fountain in the square to wait. After a while, he heard the sound of a carriage coming from outside. He immediately stood on his tiptoes and saw a noble carriage being escorted by 2 groups of knights. He saw the flag on the carriage, and his face slightly changed. He didn't expect to meet his old enemy so soon. Soon, the carriage showed its invitation and was let in by the guards. A middle-aged guard next to the carriage saw Tamaka. He immediately raised his eyebrows and ridiculed. "Isn't this Tamaka? What's wrong? Abandoned by the 9th Region? You came here to be a watchdog?" Tamaka's face was gloomy. He coldly said, "You're still the same. A dog's mouth can't spit out ivory." "Really? Then why don't you spit it out for me?" The middle-aged man teased. Tamaka was speechless. "Suspicious," he said to Dean. "Since you are the guest of my master, please show me the invitation." Dean nodded and looked at Sergei, who was in front of the carriage. "Show him." Sergei grinned. "All right." He jumped off the horse and came in front of the middle-aged guard. The middle-aged guard looked at him strangely. Just as he was about to speak, he saw a black shadow rushing towards him. He was startled, and just as he was about to raise his hand to block, the black shadow had already hit his face. Suddenly, he felt an indescribable pain, and his body retreated several steps, rolling a few times. Sergei shook his hand and grinned. "This is an invitation. Does it look good?" "It's as beautiful as a flower." Glenn jumped down from the other horse. Her figure flickered as she quickly swept towards the other alerted guards. A dagger quietly appeared between her fingers. Her fingertips flashed with a silver light as the guards surrounding her fell down one after another. Blood gushed out of their necks. The battle in front of them seemed to have nothing to do with Dean. He slowly lifted the curtain and got off the carriage. He reached out to hold Aisha's hand as he escorted her down the stairs step by step. All the guards at the gate had fallen to the ground. Sergei, Gwyneth, and Noyce stepped over the corpses and blood as they pushed the gate open. "Gabriel, keep up." Dean called out to Gabriel, who was acting as the coachman. Gabriel's face turned pale as he saw the corpses of the guards fall to the ground. He had never seen so much blood. The scene of Glenn's group of 4 slaughtering reminded him of the scene of butchers killing pigs in the village. The only difference was that the butchers were always accompanied by the squeals of pigs. Dean tightened the robe that was draped over his shoulders as he led Aisha through the clean ground. He saw a familiar face as he entered the gate. Did they go in? Tamarko's face was pale as he looked at Dean. He thought that Dean would be blocked by the guards and retreat. He didn't expect that Dean would use such a crazy way to break in. It must be known that this was the Fillon family's territory. Yes, they went in. Tamarko came back to his senses and quickly replied, "They have all gone in and are waiting for you inside." Dean nodded slightly and led Aisha into the hall. Chapter 614. In the depths of the castle of the Fillon family, there were intricate and dark passages that spread throughout the castle. Dark knights were stationed to guard the passages. After passing through one mechanism after another, Shooting Wolf finally led the 9 people to the dark meeting hall where the Elder Conference was held. This was an extremely spacious hall, and the walls were embedded with fist-sized, milky, white crystals. If anyone thought that these were natural ores, they would be gravely mistaken. These were the fluorescent organs of some kind of demon. Even if they were cut off, as long as they were well preserved, they could continue to glow for several years, even up to 10 years. Shooting Wolf glanced at the hall. He felt that the decorations here, including the round table, the 12 elders' chairs, and the decorations on the walls were particularly familiar. It seemed that it was similar to the highest hall of the Holy Church. The only difference was that the hall of the Holy Church was decorated with gold. It was full of holy atmosphere. Moreover, it was bright and transparent. Even at night, people's hair could be seen. However, it was dark here. Even during the day, it was difficult to see the light. Evil people. Even the council hall imitates the Holy Church. Shoot Wolf sneered in his heart. At the same time, he felt a little proud. After he found his seat, he sat down immediately. Only 2 knights were left behind to guard the chair, ready to be deployed at any time. The rest of the people retreated to the dark corner at the back of the hall and waited for further orders. Shooting Wolf's face was indifferent as he looked at the 4 people who had arrived first. There was no expression on his face. However, his eyes stopped on a short old man for a moment. He was secretly shocked. When he had been a librarian and had been the 9th district elder for a few months, he had heard about the most famous people of the Dark Church. The 3 Dark Kings were the most famous people: Sword King, Pluto, and Night King. These 3 people's names were equally resounding in the Holy Church and the Holy Church. Sword King has arrived. Pluto and Night King should be here soon. The Pope should send the Great Light King. Shooting Wolf's eyes flashed. The fear in his heart was replaced by contempt. The Great Light King was the strongest knight of the Holy Church. He was the invincible god of war of the Holy Church. He was also the strongest person in the outer wall. It was said that he was a master even in the inner wall. These mice in the dark would be caught in one fell swoop if he made a move. Thinking of this, the corners of his mouth curled up. He slowly turned his head and quietly looked outside, hoping that time would pass faster. Not long after, more people came in from the outside. They were dressed differently from Shoot Wolf. Most of them were wearing black robes, and a huge hood covered half of their faces. In the dimly lit hall, their faces were even more blurry. Shoot Wolf was dressed in a noble suit, which made him look a bit different. He also attracted the attention of a few people. This made Shoot Wolf frown. He knew that he had been too careless. However, he believed that this alone wouldn't expose his identity. After all, most of the Dark Church's people were eccentric and twisted. His appearance could also be included in the list of strange hobbies. It wasn't a flaw. It's still the same. It's dark here. Suddenly, a voice came from outside. Then, a skinny, cold-looking young man walked in. He glanced at the hall indifferently. His gaze stopped on Shoot Wolf for a moment. Then he walked straight to his seat, the second seat at the top. The short old man whom Shooting Wolf had noticed earlier glanced at the cold-looking young man and said, "We have always lived in the dark. Do you want to learn from the Radiant Church and make this place luxurious and dazzling?" After the cold-looking young man sat down, he gently leaned on the back of the chair and indifferently said, "Why not? Who said that the Dark Church's conference hall must be dark? Why can a Holy Church's hall be brightly lit? This is called fitting the identity." The short old man said, "Untouchables should wear the clothes of untouchables. They can't wear the clothes of nobles. Similarly, nobles can't wear the linen clothes of the untouchables. Isn't this monotonous?" The cold-looking young man said, "After a long time, people will get tired of it. Untouchables may one day have the courage to wear the clothes of nobles and eat the food of nobles. Isn't it good to occasionally change the taste? If you eat too much, you'll have diarrhea." The short old man indifferently said. Hearing the words of these two people, the rest of the people in the hall were silent. Shoot Wolf saw that the cold-looking young man glanced at him. He knew that the meaning of these words was a warning to him and others. After he became the elder of the 9th District, he didn't pay tribute to the Night King. He also didn't visit him. The 9th District originally belonged to the Night King's influence. His actions obviously angered the king of the Dark Church. However, he didn't expect that the Sword King would speak up for him. It seemed that the relationship between the three kings was not only hostile competition, but also cooperation. At this time, a few people came from outside. Shoot Wolf finally saw Hell King, who was the last to arrive. The latter looked like a strong man with a tall and sturdy body. However, his resolute face was full of a decisive temperament. He wasn't a rough and boorish man. "It seems that everyone is here." Hell King sat on the highest chair and glanced at the audience. He slowly said, "In that case, the elders' meeting will officially begin. Everyone." At this point, he suddenly stopped and raised his head to look at the sky. The rest of the people saw his action and looked up in confusion. However, they didn't see any hidden weapons or ambushes on the dome of the hall. One of them said, "Your Majesty Hell King, what are you doing? There are guests coming." The short old man, sitting on another chair, said coldly. Shoot Wolf was startled. Suddenly, his heart moved. Was that person coming? He couldn't help but look up. He held his breath and listened to the movements on the ground above his head. In the extreme silence, in addition to the breathing of some of the guards brought by the elders, he also heard bursts of increasingly chaotic footsteps coming from the ground above his head. At the same time, there were bursts of harsh sounds of metal colliding. "Someone is invading?" Another woman wearing a veil said in surprise. "It seems that there are a lot of guards. It seems that all the guards of the Philin family have been dispatched." Shoot Wolf was delighted. His eyes lit up. "It's His Majesty the Pontiff." He couldn't help but want to stand up and cheer. However, thinking that the people present were enough to kill him before the top was breached, he held back the joy in his heart. He quietly sat on the chair and tried his best to restrain the excitement in his heart. "Sword servant, go out and take a look." The short old man ordered a young man who was serving on the back of the chair. Before he finished speaking, The ground suddenly shook. Then, the sound of sand and stones falling from the top of everyone's head was heard. With a bang, a huge rock suddenly collapsed. The people present reacted very quickly. Before the huge rock hit the conference table, they quickly retreated. Bang! A knight fell from the huge rock and rolled on the ground. He spat out blood and was on the verge of death. At the same time, several figures jumped down from above and stood on the table that was crushed by the huge rock. They directly attacked. When Shooting Wolf saw the collapsed dome of the main hall, he was secretly delighted. When the dust settled, he hurriedly looked up and was immediately stunned. The few people who had jumped down were not the Great Light King and the Chief Knight of Light that he had expected, but an extremely familiar young face. It was actually him. While Shooting Wolf was stunned, the rest of the people reacted. The Sword King coldly snorted and said, "So, it is not the Great Light King Roa. A nobody dares to behave atrociously here?" Dean looked at the edge of the collapsed hole. The knights of the Fillin family were standing in a circle. They were glaring at him. He slowly retracted his eyes and looked at the short old man. "Tell them to retreat. I want to talk to you quietly." The Sword King slightly narrowed his eyes. He had already noticed that the newcomers were not a large group, but the commotion they created was comparable to that of an elite division. It could be seen that these people were not weak, and it was difficult to use numbers to deal with experts, not to mention that the number of knights outside was not a sea of people. He snorted coldly, raised his head, and said, "You guys retreat first. Let Phil watch the surroundings." Two of the knights outside heard his words and immediately gestured for the others to retreat. "It's smart." Dean said a word of appreciation. He led Aisha down from the boulder and came to a chair that was overturned on the ground. He pulled up a chair and patted the dust on it before sitting down. Sword King and others frowned as they looked at Dean's slow and unhurried appearance. There were a total of 6 people with Dean. They couldn't think of anyone who dared to trespass into this place. It must be known that there were famous masters in the top 20 of the Outer Wall, especially the 3 king-level masters. All of them were close to the Great Light King. "Boy, what are you doing? Tell me your name. If you want to die, then I'll help you," a strong man said in an angry voice. Dean calmly looked at him. "I'm the previous elder of the 9th region. By the way, my code name also has the word king." Everyone was startled. "You are the previous Devil King of the 9th region?" The burly man was stunned for a moment, and then he sneered and said, "Kid, you're really tired of living. You left your post without permission and are wanted by the speaker, yet you still dare to appear here. You're simply courting death. You even codenamed Demon King? How childish and laughable. If you are a devil, then I am the Great Devil King." Dean looked at the crowd. "In that case, everyone must have heard of me. Now, boy, don't talk nonsense. Since you are here, then get ready to die." The man interrupted Dean and sneered. He looked at the others. "Everyone, the person that the speaker wants to kill is here. What are you waiting for? Kill him." Dean frowned slightly and glanced at him. "You are really noisy." The bell on his wrist jingled as he shook it. Whoosh! A gust of wind suddenly blew. The dust that had just fallen from the ground gently fluttered in the breeze. The burly man sneered. "Brat, you." His voice stopped abruptly as a cold, sharp palm pierced through his chest, piercing through his heart. He lowered his head in disbelief and stared blankly at his own chest. A slender arm with snow-white skin really appeared in his eyes. How is it possible?" The strong man's voice was hoarse. His eyes dimmed as his body fell straight down. Aisha withdrew her palm. The blood in her palm stimulated her instincts. She slightly grinned, revealing a bit of a sinister expression. She raised her hand and gently licked the blood on her fingers as if she was sucking an extremely delicious sauce. Everyone who was ready to attack was stunned as they saw the sudden scene. Sword King, Hell King, and Night King's faces changed as they looked at Aisha in horror. Even with their eyesight, they couldn't see how the girl appeared in front of Tebri. If she had attacked them at such an unpredictable speed, then they would have been the ones to fall at the moment. The 3 of them felt a chill run down their spines. The sense of urgency of their lives being threatened which they had not felt for a long time and had almost forgotten, spread through their hearts. Now it's quiet. Let's continue. Dean slowly said, "From today on, I'm the speaker of the Dark Church. You only need to be loyal to me. Is there a problem?" Everyone was stunned. Shoot Wolf's expression was ugly, and his palms were covered in cold sweat. He had not expected the woman behind this young man to be so powerful. Although he could not judge how strong this woman was, he knew from the reaction of the three kings that the woman's previous attack had completely stunned them. With such strength, she could most likely contend against the Great Light King. In that case, if the Great Light King came tonight, there would most likely be a fierce battle. Damn! He cursed in his heart as he clenched his fists. Hell King stared at Dean after a brief silence. "Be loyal to you? Although you are strong, but you seem to have nothing. Everything will be born as long as I exist." Dean calmly replied. On the other side, the Night Lord frowned slightly and said coldly, "Do you think you're God? Do you think there is light when you say there is light?" Dean nodded. "Yes." Night King snorted. "Although you are strong, but it is a bit difficult to defeat the three of us at the same time. I advise you to leave as soon as possible so that nothing has happened. It is impossible for you to be the speaker. The speaker won't allow you to exist. You may not know, but the speaker of the Dark Church can communicate with the inner wall. Although your strength is good, but there are many masters in the inner wall. Any one of them is enough to kill you. If that is the case, then why don't they send a master to help you flatten the Holy Church?" Dean quietly looked at him. Chapter 6:15. What you said is very reasonable, but it is useless. Dudian indifferently said, "I only give you two choices. Either surrender to me and respect me as the king, or die here. Make your choice." Everyone's face slightly changed as they looked at each other. No one made a sound. After waiting for a few minutes, Dudian saw that no one spoke. "Since it is difficult for you to choose, and you don't want to be the first bird, I will ask one by one. You can choose the small roll." "Small roll?" The middle-aged man who was pointed at by Dudian was startled. He frowned as he heard the strange name. "What do you mean by small roll?" "My code name is Guardian. Small roll means that I don't need to know your name." Dudian interrupted him. "Stop the nonsense. Which one do you choose?" The Guardian didn't expect Dudian to be so arrogant. He didn't put him in his eyes at all. His eyes were gloomy as he slightly clenched his fingers. If it was someone else who despised him like this, then their head would have been separated from their body. But thinking of Teberi, who was killed in an instant, he couldn't help but look at the girl who exuded a dangerous aura. His face slightly changed as he whispered, "I am willing to surrender to you. Since you have chosen to surrender, then you should use honorifics." Dudian indifferently said. The Guardian's teeth slightly clenched, but there was no trace of anger on his face. He bowed his head. "The Guardian is willing to surrender to you." Dudian said, "Louder." The Guardian's face turned ugly as he bowed his head. "The Guardian is willing to surrender to you." His voice spread to the outside of the hall. The guard knew that once he said this, there was no turning back. Once Dean was defeated, even if he begged for mercy, the speaker would not let him go easily. From the moment his voice spread to the outside, it was already destined that he would set foot on Dean's boat. Dudian nodded and pointed to another person next to him. "It's your turn. Night King, Sword King, Hell King, are we really going to submit to him? Instead of being defeated one by one, why don't we join forces and fight to the death with him? I don't believe that with so many experts gathered here, we'll be afraid of just 7 of them." The second person named by Dudian was a very tall, middle-aged man. He didn't say anything and immediately turned to Sword King and the others. He didn't want to surrender, but he didn't dare to face Dean alone. At this moment, he took the risk to say these words. Sword King and the others were arrogant. They wouldn't easily surrender to others. Hearing his words, the Sword King and the others' expressions changed slightly. The 3 of them exchanged glances and communicated with each other. "Foolish," Dean said indifferently. He suddenly raised his hand, and a black light flew out. Puff! A dagger suddenly appeared on the middle-aged man's throat. More than half of the dagger went in, and blood quickly overflowed. The middle-aged man covered his throat as he looked at Dean in disbelief. His attention was focused on the girl who killed Tebri when he said those words. He didn't expect that Dean would personally kill her. Moreover, he would throw the knife to kill her. The middle-aged man's body struggled to fall down. He tightly covered his throat. His trachea was cut, but he didn't suffocate to death. It was only a matter of time before he died. Sword King, right? Dean's eyes fell on the short old man. Which one do you want to choose? Sword King was shocked. The speed of Dean's throwing knife was so fast that he couldn't see it clearly. In other words, in addition to the girl, Dean himself was not inferior to them. If it was only the girl, then he was confident that with so many people, they could escape even if they couldn't beat her. But Dean's strength wasn't weak. Moreover, there were 5 other people. It was hard to guarantee that there wouldn't be a master like the girl. Thinking of this, he slowly recovered. He looked at Dean's indifferent eyes. He felt that the youth's calm and deep eyes seemed to penetrate into the depths of his heart. There was a kind of cramped feeling that there was nowhere to hide. Sword King, let's join hands. The Night King saw that the Sword King was a little shaken. Noisy. Dean glanced at him. His figure suddenly flew out from the chair like a black lightning and instantly rolled up a gust of wind. His figure whistled through the wind and went straight to the front of the Night King. The Night King was aghast and instinctively retreated. But the speed of his retreat was completely incomparable to Dean. In the blink of an eye, Dean was already in front of him. Night King didn't see Dean make a move, but he felt a bone-chilling palm on his throat, choking him to the point of suffocation. In front of them, you are the king. Dean grabbed the Night King's throat and lifted his body. In front of me, you are nothing. The Night King looked at him in fear. He never thought that he would become so weak that he couldn't resist. However, he was after all a veteran. He didn't panic in this critical moment. His palm suddenly pulled out the sword from his waist and chopped towards Dean's arm. With a clanging sound, the saber stopped halfway through its swing. Dean's other hand was holding the knife, and the sharp blade of the poisonous knife cut his palm. It was like cutting metal, making a hard and sharp sound. Ignorant, Dean clenched his fingers. Gotcha! His fingers pierced into the Night King's throat and crushed his Adam's apple. Gotcha! The Night King didn't have time to scream. His eyes widened as blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. His body lost strength, and his arm fell down. Dean loosened his grip, and the sword fell to the ground with a clang. The rest of the people were scared to the point that their hair stood up. Dean threw away the body of the Night King. He took out a handkerchief and wiped his palms as he walked back to his seat. The hall was quiet. Both King of Hell and King of Sword, who were ready to attack, were stunned in place. They looked at the scene in disbelief. The shock in their hearts couldn't be any greater. Why do you always feel pain after being slapped? Dean slowly wiped his palms. I thought that at least you have a bit of eyesight since you can get to this position. I didn't expect you to be a group of stupid, mediocre people. I have the confidence to defeat you and the chairman. Why do you have to use your life to test the strength of the enemy? Is your life so cheap that you don't know how to cherish it? Everyone was startled as they looked at the youth. If there was any hope in their hearts before, then there was only despair now. As one of the 3 kings, the Night King was killed by Dean in seconds. He didn't even have the ability to fight back. Such power was far above them. Even if all of them attacked together, they would die in vain. Don't know how to cherish life? It's obviously you who killed indiscriminately. Shooting Wolf came back to his senses. He felt a bit complicated. Although the death of the Night King made him very happy, but the appearance of a person who was much more terrifying than the 3 kings. With this person joining the Dark Church, the Luminous Church would most likely suffer heavy losses in the future. He secretly prayed that the Pope would be aware of the sudden situation and stop the attack. Otherwise, even if the Great Light King came tonight, he would die here. You haven't answered me yet, Sword King. Dean looked at the Sword King. The Sword King's face was ugly. His palms were full of cold sweat. He slightly gritted his teeth. I am willing to surrender to you. His voice was very loud. He didn't let Dean repeat the previous lesson. Dean nodded and pointed to another person. What about you? I am willing to surrender to you, Devil King. I'm also willing to surrender to you. The others didn't wait for Dean's guidance, as they immediately took the initiative. They already knew that the situation was hopeless and stubborn resistance would only lead to destruction. Instead of letting Dean ask, it was better to take the initiative. It would also show that they were more active and sincere. I'm also willing to surrender to you. Pluto bowed respectfully. In the blink of an eye, everyone bowed to Dean to show their surrender. Dean looked at it and nodded. Not bad. You have a bit of brain. Everyone was silent as they heard his slightly mocking praise. They began to think about their future plans. After all, surrendering to Dean was a small matter. The biggest problem was the chairman of the Dark Church. Elder, I don't know what your plans are in the future. The chairman of the Dark Church can contact the powerhouses of the inner wall. I'm afraid if the inner wall sends the powerhouses to deal with you. Sword King was worried. You don't have to worry about this. Dean indifferently said, from today, the 12th region of the Dark Church is a whole. I don't want to see any internal strife. As for the chairman of the Dark Church and the Holy Church, I will personally solve them tomorrow. I only have one request for you. Unify all the consortiums, nobles, and commoners within a week. Everyone was startled. Shu Tiger's face changed as he heard Dean's words. He was nervous as he fell in a deep thought. Pluto looked at Dean. Elder, the foundations of the 6 consortiums and all the nobles are spread all over the forces. I'm afraid to unify them within a week. Dean indifferently looked at him. In terms of foundation and influence, are they as deep as the Dark Church? The Nether King hastily said, of course not. It only took me one night to unify all of you. But you have 7 days to unify the 6 consortiums. Do you think it is difficult? Dean said in a cold voice. Pluto was startled. The others' faces slightly changed. Sword King was aware of Dean's thoughts. Elder, do you mean that we should forcibly unify the consortiums? All the rules are forced. Dean indifferently said, it's just the difference between fast and slow. Sword King asked, what if the nobles vigorously resist? Then use a more powerful means to suppress them. I know. Sword King bowed his head and didn't say anything more. Dean's indifferent eyes slowly swept through the crowd. I know that some of you are pretending to surrender to me. You will run to the chairman and cry about the betrayal. But I have to remind you that no master will like a dog that has rebelled. Even if you can avoid death, you may not be able to get an important position in the future. So do your best. Sword King and others' faces slightly changed. Indeed, some of them had such a plan. Although Dean was very strong, but the gap was too far compared to the inner wall. Moreover, the chairman was backed by the inner wall, so naturally he was the biggest backer. If you follow me, then you will get things that you didn't dare to hope for before. Dean's eyes lit up. Now I want to ask a few things. I will reward anyone who can provide effective information. Reward? Everyone pricked up their ears as they curiously looked at the teenager. First, who knows the Pope's preferences? Dean asked. Everyone looked at each other. It was obvious that Dean was ready to deal with the Pope. I know, Pluto said. According to the information I have, the Pope likes Master Benny's music. He rarely misses Master Benny's concerts. Dean nodded. This information is good. From today on, you will be in charge of the 12th district. You will be promoted to deputy chairman. Pluto was surprised. Thank you, Elder. Others blinked their eyes in disbelief. How could he get such a reward just by providing such information? How could he be promoted to deputy chairman? The second question, does anyone know the whereabouts of the genius magic master who appeared out of nowhere not long ago? Sword King asked. Elders referring to the genius called Dean? Dean nodded. Yes. I know. Someone eagerly opened his mouth. According to the news I got from the Temple of Elements, this genius was recognized by the inner wall and was sent to the inner wall. Nonsense. Another woman with white skin said, I got news that the genius was forcibly taken away by the people of the inner wall. They said that he colluded with the Dark Church and will be taken to the inner wall for investigation. Oof. The first person snorted, You don't know about this. The inner wall deliberately slandered him and brought him to the inner wall. If he really colluded with us, then how would the inner wall know about it? If they knew, then how would there be no evidence? If there was evidence, why would they bring him back for investigation? They would have killed him on the spot. The woman with white skin frowned. Then why would the inner wall do this? Isn't it smearing his reputation? The first person shrugged. How would I know? Does anyone else know? Dean interrupted the dispute between the two. The others looked at each other, but didn't speak. Chapter 6:16. Everyone was surprised as they looked at each other. They hadn't heard of this matter, but they didn't expect Dean to know about it. It was obvious that the other party's intelligence network was wider and deeper than their grasp. Even it had penetrated into the inner wall. Everyone was secretly awe-inspiring as they thought of this. They felt that it was possible to solve the Dark Parliament's problem. Moreover, Dean's strength was far beyond the level of hunters. It was impossible to have such a powerful strength if he didn't have a background in the inner wall. It was important to know that only the inner wall had God's marrow, although they could exchange it through secret channels, but the price was expensive and the quantity was very small. It would take a long time to accumulate God's marrow to help people to break through the hunter's limit. Dean squinted his eyes as he asked the question. His broad vision allowed him to notice everyone's expression at the same time. Hearing this third question, the Nether King was slightly startled. He was shocked that this cold youth's intelligence was so extensive. He actually knew such a secret. He thought that he was the only one who knew about Dean's adoptive parents. After all, the area where the genius lived wasn't far from the area under his jurisdiction. Pluto had noticed the genius when he became famous. He sent people to monitor him in secret, and the harvest was not small. He knew that the genius was suffering from some kind of disease when his adoptive mother brought a medical kit into his castle. Moreover, it was a disease that couldn't be known by others. Secret was a person's weakness. It was also the best weapon that could be used. It was great news for him. He could use this point to make Dean join him. Unfortunately, he didn't dig out the information from the woman's mouth. He was about to blackmail Dean, but Dean was taken away by the inner wall. He had no choice but to regret his actions. But he didn't think that he wasn't the only one who knew about this matter. Thinking of this, he secretly looked at Dean. Suddenly, he thought of a place that he had neglected. When he chose to publish the news of the death of Dean's adoptive parents in the newspaper, his purpose was to let the new elder of the 9th region, who was in front of him, know about it. The purpose of letting the youth know about the death was to verify whether he was the genius sent by the monastery or not. After all, the monastery was the one who took away Dean. Pluto was also from the monastery, so he knew a little about the monastery's way of doing things. Could it be? He was surprised and looked up at Dean quietly. He saw that Dean was also staring at him. Dean's eyes seemed to go straight to the depths of his heart, exposing all his secrets. Pluto's heart tightened as he lowered his head. Cold sweat overflowed from his palms. No, it must be a mistake. Pluto thought to himself, that kid is only talented in divine technique. He can't be compared to this person. Even with the resources of the mystic sect, he can only reach the same level as me. It's impossible for him to be so strong. He can easily kill a top hunter like the Night King. This is at least the level of a high-level frontiersman. I must be thinking too much. Pluto's heart gradually relaxed as he thought about the previous two questions. Asking about the Pope's preferences should mean that he wants to defeat the Dark Church and start a war with the Pope. Asking about this genius should mean that he wants to get this person. After all, this genius is too powerful. He can repel the barbarians by himself. He only needs to produce a legendary item to be comparable to 10 or more senior hunters. His mood was completely relaxed as he thought of this. He was about to report to Dudian, but he was stunned. The next moment, his pupils shrank and his body was covered with goosebumps. No, Pluto's heart was full of horror. Why would he ask who killed the kid's adoptive parents? Wasn't his goal to find out what his adoptive parents knew? Why didn't he ask the people who killed his adoptive parents if they knew this information from them? Isn't this the most important point? Pluto's heart was pounding, but soon he thought, maybe I'm thinking too much. He just wants to ask who killed his adoptive parents first, and then ask if he knows anything about it. Pluto hesitated as he thought about this possibility. His intuition told him that there was something strange about this matter. He pondered for a moment and chose to remain silent. He thought to himself, I'm already the deputy speaker. There's no need for me to claim any more credit, lest others get jealous of me. Besides, if he's that divine incantation kid, I'm dead meat. Why? Doesn't anyone know? Dean narrowed his eyes as he saw that no one answered. Everyone looked at each other, looking at each other, but no one spoke. Who is the fourth elder? Dean frowned. A middle-aged man shrouded in a black robe, short and fat like a bucket, hastily said, It's me. Dean stared at him. As far as I know, the place where they died is in your jurisdiction, right? Yes, the stout middle-aged man said in embarrassment, but I really didn't pay attention to such insignificant people. Who would have thought that they would know about the genius in the divine incantation? If I had known earlier, I would have directly kidnapped them and interrogated them. Dean stared at him for a long time. He turned to Pluto. Do you know anything? Pluto's heart tightened. Elder, this subordinate, didn't pay attention to these small characters. Really? Dean stared at him. Pluto's heart beat faster as he looked at Dean's eyes. It seemed that all of his thoughts had been seen through. However, he was in a high position for many years, so he responded quickly. Elder, this subordinate really doesn't know. But this subordinate will go back and investigate the cause of death. Cause of death. Dean narrowed his eyes. Don't you know? Pluto was startled as his heartbeat sped up. He clenched his fists and looked at Dean. Elder, I really didn't know. Although I thought about using the adoptive parents of the genius to threaten him to help the Dark Church manufacture the inventions. But then I thought that they were just adoptive parents and their feelings weren't deep. Moreover, as far as I know, the genius was forcibly recruited to the scavenger training camp after he was adopted by his adoptive parents. They spent less time together, so I didn't do that. In case we fail, we will be exposed and will arouse the vigilance of other forces. The others nodded slightly as they heard his words. Indeed, they had similar thoughts, but they gave up because of the same reason. After all, the halo of that genius was too bright at that time. Moreover, he was a person who had been appointed by the Night Hall. It could be said that he had a bright future ahead of him. It was unrealistic for him to abandon his halo and join the Dark Church for the sake of his adoptive parents. Dean stared at Pluto for a moment before slowly retracting his eyes. When everyone thought that the question was over, he looked at Pluto again. Did you kill them? Pluto's heart contracted as cold sweat overflowed from his body. He felt that he was completely seen through as he looked at Dean's eyes. After all, lying was a guilty thing. Although he was sophisticated enough to lie, but this matter was related to his life and death. Dean had pointed it out in front of his face. It was a kind of shock for him. In the next second, he reacted and said with a bitter face, Sir, I really didn't kill them. If I did, I would definitely report it to you. Please believe in my loyalty. Dean stared at him for a moment, then retracted his eyes again. I believe you. It was just a joke. Don't take it to heart. Pluto cursed in his heart. Joke? Who is joking with you? Although he was angry, but he was basically sure that the person in front of him was absolutely the genius Dean. Moreover, he was 100% sure that Dean was brought into the inner wall from the moment he took up the position of Elder of the Ninth Region. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel shocked. He didn't expect a genius in divine incantations to grow to such a terrifying degree, especially his strength. It was even more terrifying than his own attainments in divine incantations. However, he admired himself. Fortunately, he was quick enough to react. He wasn't greedy, or he would have been killed by now. But why would he ask about me? Could it be that I've been exposed? Pluto calmed down as he secretly pondered. He decided that the first thing he would do after going back was to kill all the people who knew about the incident. That included his trusted confidant and secretary. That's all for today. You can disperse. There was a deep pain in his eyes. He slowly got off the carriage and said to Pluto, Come down. Pluto had been paying attention to the surroundings along the way. He was puzzled as he saw this strange and remote place. There was a sense of danger in his heart. His intuition told him that he should escape immediately, but he resisted the impulse as he thought of Dean's amazing speed and strength. He got off the carriage and respectfully asked, "Elder, where are we?" "This is the cemetery of my adoptive parents, Gray and Jura, and another child they adopted," Dudian slowly said. His voice was emotionless, as cold as the cold wind. Pluto's pupils shrank as he heard Dean's words. He didn't expect Dean to admit it. Moreover, this was the cemetery of his adoptive parents. After recovering from his shock, he suddenly turned around and ran. Dean's figure flashed and appeared in front of Pluto. "Where are you going?" Pluto braked and abruptly stopped his body. At the same time, he pulled out the machete from his waist and stabbed towards Dean's throat. Dean pinched Pluto's wrist and gently twisted it. Crack! The sound of bones breaking echoed as Pluto's wrist was bent in a 90-degree position. Pluto was in unbearable pain, but at the moment of life and death, he didn't care so much. He quickly punched and spat out something. Dean seemed to have expected it. He tilted his head and dodged a small black object that was shot out from the man's mouth. At the same time, he grabbed the man's fist and twisted it again. Kacha! The man's hand was broken. Dean squeezed his hands and looked at him indifferently. "Are you wondering why I know that you killed them?" Chapter 617. When you killed them, did you hear their pleas? Dean's tone was slow as he spoke. The pain continued to spread throughout Pluto's body. The bones in his broken wrist were being ground bit by bit. Pluto's forehead was covered with cold sweat. "Elder, I really didn't. Please don't believe the slander of the villains. Please believe me." Pluto looked up and pleaded in a sincere tone. At the same time, Pluto's men reacted. They pulled out their swords and rushed over. Sergei, Glenn, and others didn't sit back and watch. They quickly came up to greet them. The sound of weapons clashing echoed around them. Only two of them had a big reaction when I asked the third question. Dean slowly said, "The other one didn't react as frequently as you. Your psychological activities are repeatedly changing. I forgot to tell you that one of my magic marks abilities is X-ray vision. I can see your heartbeat, the movement of your stomach, and even the flow of your blood." X-ray vision? Pluto was stunned. How could Dean have such a top-level vision ability? His heart fell into the deep valley. He was full of despair, but he didn't want to accept his fate. He pleaded, "Elder, I admit that I was thinking a bit too much at that time. But isn't it too hasty to judge that I killed your adoptive parents based on this point? I just thought of other things. That's why I had a big reaction. But it has nothing to do with your adoptive parents. I really didn't kill them. You're looking for the wrong person for revenge. You will only let the real murderer go. It's better to kill the wrong person than to miss it." Dean indifferently said, "Moreover, the evidence that you are the murderer isn't limited to this point. The reason why I haven't killed you is because there is one more thing that you haven't done." Pluto felt that he had grasped a glimmer of hope. "Elder, you really can't kill me. You have just promoted me to deputy speaker. If you kill me now, then it will provoke criticism. I can promote you to deputy speaker at any time. You don't need to pay attention to criticism." Both of Pluto's hands were completely twisted off. Even a strong person like Pluto couldn't bear the pain of having his wrist broken. "I will take this opportunity to tell them that any power or position is under my control." Dean grabbed Pluto's shoulder and carried him into the woods. Whoosh! The three attendants who were fighting with Sergei saw the opportunity and rushed towards Dudian. Dean didn't even look at him. He raised his hand and slapped the man's sword away. His palm pressed on the man's chest. The man flew out and hit another attendant. "Try to keep them alive," Dean said as he carried Pluto into the woods. In the dark forest, the low chirping sounds of insects and the rustling of leaves in the wind could be heard. It was as if there were countless ghosts and evil shadows leaping about in the forest, causing people to tremble in fear. Dean's face didn't change. He carried Pluto to an open space in the woods. There was a small mound on the ground. There was no tombstone on it. With a wave of his hand, he threw the Nether King in front of the small mound and said, "Kneel." Pluto clenched his teeth in pain. He used his knees and shoulders to prop himself up from the ground. His heart turned cold as he heard Dean's words. He knew what Dean wanted him to do. He didn't think that he would fall into such a miserable situation. He had to kneel down in front of a few ants. Even if he knelt down, he wouldn't be able to save his life. Gritting his teeth, he slowly stood up from the ground and said, "Even if I die, I won't die on my knees. That's right. I was the one who killed your adoptive parents. I was the one who sent people to kill them. Not only did I send people to kill them, I even tortured them to death. Didn't you see how they died? How miserable they were. Ha ha ha. You were actually able to hold back your desire to take revenge. In the end, your feelings for them are only SOSO." Pluto's voice suddenly stopped as he knelt down. He saw Dean kick him from behind, and it happened to hit the soft ribs behind his knees. Pluto's eyes turned red as he roared. He wanted to stand up again. Dean's palm pressed on his shoulder. It was like a mountain was pressing down on him. Pluto couldn't move. "Kowtow," Dean indifferently said. Pluto roared. "Don't even think about." He didn't finish his words as his body bent down. His head hit the ground. Dean pressed the back of Pluto's head on the soil in front of the mound. "Kowtow again." Dean grabbed Pluto's hair and pulled him up. He didn't wait for Pluto's eyes to see the front as his head was pressed down again. The coarse sand on Pluto's forehead hurt like needles. Again, Dean pulled Pluto's hair and knocked him down again. He slowly knelt down and pressed Pluto's head on the ground. He whispered to the mound, "Aunt Jura, Uncle Gray, I brought the murderer who killed you. Did you see him? He is repenting and making amends." "You want me to make amends? Don't even think about it." Pluto roared. Dean pressed hard with his palm, pressing his whole face into the soil. Suddenly, he couldn't open his mouth. "Unfortunately, I'm still too late." Dean looked at the small mound. There was a trace of loneliness in his indifferent eyes. "I made you suffer so much. You should have lived an ordinary life and be happy until old. But because of me, although you have lived a few good days, but you have paid too much. It seems that the most useless thing in the world is to apologize. Nothing can be restored. Nothing can be changed." Pluto twisted his neck as he listened to Dean's voice. He violently struggled, but his face was pressed down. He could only make nasal sounds. "I wish you a good journey." Dean stared at the mound for a moment. He slowly retracted his eyes. His hand that was pressing the back of Pluto's head slowly slid down and pinched Pluto's neck. In an instant, the struggling Nether King's body froze, as though time had stopped. "Woo!" A sobbing sound rang out, and in the next moment, a loud and clear sound of bones breaking rang out. The Nether King's neck was squeezed so hard that it looked like an hourglass. His voice stopped abruptly, and his body gradually went limp. Dean slowly got up and looked back. He saw that Sergei and the others had finished their battle. They brought the 4 people into the woods. "Kneel down," Dean calmly said. Sergei and the others looked at the mound. They knew that it was the grave of Dean's adoptive parents. They pushed the 4 people and forced them to kneel in front of the grave. The 4 people didn't dare to resist as they saw Pluto kneel down. Dean silently looked at them for a long time. He made a gesture to Sergei and the others. Then he led Aisha out of the woods. Sergei immediately made a move. Several screams echoed in the woods. There were 5 figures kneeling in front of the mound in the dark woods. It was particularly treacherous in the dark night. Dean went out of the woods and got into the carriage. He looked at Gabriel, who was nervous and sweating. "Are you afraid?" Gabriel swallowed his saliva and shook his head. "No, I'm not afraid." Dean sat back in the carriage and put down the curtain. Sergei, Glenn, and others came out of the woods and got on their horses. Dean's voice echoed from behind the curtain. "Go to Utopia Mountain." Sergei, Glenn, and the others were shocked when they heard this. Sergei said, "Master, Utopia Mountain is the headquarters of the Holy Church. Are you going to deal with the Pope now?" "Do I need to pick an auspicious day to deal with him?" Dean said. Sergei replied, "Master, I didn't mean that. It's so late. You can go back and rest if you're tired." Sergei hurriedly said, "Master, I mean that Holy Church is much more powerful than the Dark Church. Moreover, Wutuan Mountain is their headquarters. There are countless Knights of Light stationed there. We only have a few people. Shouldn't we go back and gather people? We need to make a long-term plan. Giving the enemy time to breathe is the same as reducing our own time to breathe. Dean's voice was calm. I have a plan. Gabriel, let's go. Yes, young master. Gabriel was terrified. He hurriedly responded and rode his horse back. Sergei, Glenn, and others looked at each other. They didn't expect Dean to be so anxious. Did he plan to completely control the two strongest forces in the outer wall in just one night? Utopia Mountain, the headquarters of the Holy Church. It was the symbol of holiness and beauty. The mountain was 580 meters high. The snow-white sunflowers that covered the mountains and plains were bright and tender, incomparably beautiful. But now that it was a rainy season with continuous rain, they gradually withered and were corroded by the drizzle. At the foot of the mountain, there was a street that could accommodate 8 carriages side by side. It was the most spacious street in the outer wall area. The ground was paved with snow-white stone bricks. Occasionally, the moonlight would shine down. Even at night, the entire mountain was as bright as day. It was incomparably holy. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. There was no one on the street. Even the nobles who liked to party late into the night would end the banquet at around 12 o'clock and go back to sleep. A carriage rolled over. The sound of horses' hooves was accompanied by slight shaking of the carriage. The sound was very rhythmic. The carriage stopped in front of the square outside Utopia Mountain. Dean lifted the curtain and held Aisha's hand. Master, are you really not going to think about it? Sergei looked at the towering mountain in the distance. He felt that it was like a giant beast crawling there. It was hard to imagine how many troops would be needed to attack this mountain. Dean looked up into the distance. After a moment, he said, You guys go back first. I'll go alone. Sergei and Glenn's eyes widened. You're going alone? How can this be? It's useless for you to go back. Dean said, Show the badge of the Farron family if you meet the patrolling soldiers. Their mood was complicated. Indeed, as Dean said, they wouldn't be of much use. After all, this was the headquarters of the Holy Church. Let alone 4 senior hunters. Even if there were 5 times more of them, they still wouldn't be able to make any waves here. Dean didn't wait for their reply. He held Aisha's hand and slowly walked along the street. Their figures gradually disappeared from their line of sight. There were 2 8-meter-tall angel statues at the gate. Their snow-white wings were lifelike. The feathers were delicate and full of solemn and sacred feeling. Under the angel statue, 8 knights of light were guarding the 2 sides of the huge mountain gate. At this moment, the night was deep. Only the sound of insects coming from the distant grass and the croaking of unknown frogs could be heard. This kind of sound lasted for a long time. Although the 8 knights had slept during the day, they still felt sleepy. 4 of them were sitting on the ground drinking and chatting. Whoosh! A breeze passed by from the distance. One of them, who was drinking with his head raised, heard the commotion and turned his head to take a look, only to see a cloud floating over, blocking the light of the moon and stars. It was pitch black in the distance, and he could barely see a patch of gray grass. After a moment, the wind blew away the carefully trimmed grass. There was nothing on the grass. What's wrong? Old Lay. Another person said. Old Lay rubbed his eyes and shook his head. It's nothing. I thought that someone had passed by. Old Lay, you drank too much. Who dares to come here in the middle of the night? Do you want to attack us at night? Yes. Even those dirty bitches of the dark church never dare to attack the headquarters of the Holy Church. You must have drunk too much. St. Mark's Square on the top of the mountain. The ground was as white jade. The stars were shining brightly. There were knights guarding the square. They were standing still like stone statues. In the light palace, above the square, fragrant oil lamps were hung on the pillars of the palace. The price of each oil lamp was equivalent to the income of a commoner for half a lifetime. The incandescent flames illuminated every corner of the palace, without the slightest bit of darkness. Richelieu was sleeping on the bed behind the statue of the God of Light. He had been living here since he became the Pope 30 years ago. He slept with his back against the statue every day. The light from the lantern shone on his snow-white hair and beard, emitting a radiance. Suddenly, a cold wind came from the window. One of the windows was opened. A gray figure quietly and slowly approached his bed and knelt down. Richelieu slowly opened his eyes, but did not get up. His voice was cold. "What's the matter?" If someone heard his tone, they would be surprised. It was completely different from his usual, gentle tone. It was as if he was a different person. Chapter 618. Oh! Richelieu's eyebrows slightly raised as he slowly sat up from the bed. He controlled the 12 elders? When did such a powerful person appear in the outer wall? The gray figure bowed. According to the report from the Philin family, this person seems to be the 9th elder. It's him? There was a trace of surprise in Richelieu's eyes. Others didn't know the identity of the 9th elder, but he was clear about it. The little guy had disappeared for less than a few months. How could he have such ability? Tell me the details of the situation. Is there anyone among the 12 elders? Richelieu solemnly stared at the gray figure. Just as the gray figure was about to speak, a gust of cold wind suddenly blew in from the slightly open window, causing the soft gauze curtain in the hall to flutter slightly. At the same time, a voice as indifferent as the cold wind sounded. "Your Holiness, if you want to know the situation at that time, why don't you ask me?" The two of them were startled and turned their heads to look. They saw two silhouettes standing quietly outside the soft gauze curtain. They were as silent as ghosts, as if they had been standing there for a long time. "Be careful." When the gray figure saw these two people, he quickly reacted. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and his figure suddenly flew over. He pulled out the light dagger from his waist and held it behind his back with one hand. The moment he got close to the gray figure, he suddenly thrust it out. Dean's expression was indifferent as he raised his hand to grab the dagger. At the same time, he said to Richelieu, "Pope, if you don't want to face the power of the pioneers, then it's better not to make a sound. I don't want to kill you for the time being." His voice was gentle. At the same time, his palm was like lightning as he grabbed the gray figure's wrist. The gray figure shook his wrist and suddenly threw out the dagger. At the same time, his other palm suddenly slapped towards Dean's face. Dean's eyebrows slightly moved. He didn't expect this person to be so good. He was far better than the other senior hunters he had met. However, this instantaneous rapid change was still difficult to escape his eyes. He turned his wrist and fiercely shook off the gray figure's palm. At the same time, two fingers came together and stabbed out like a sword. Puff! The gray figure couldn't dodge and immediately froze on the spot. His throat had been pierced by Dean's two fingers. When he finished speaking, the battle also ended at the same time. His fingers touched the warm blood and tissues of the gray figure, and then he mercilessly hooked two fingers back and dug out the tissues deep in the throat. At the same time, he hit the chin with the back of his hand and overturned it. The gray figure's eyes were wide open, his bloodshot eyes filled with disbelief and shock. His body fell limply to the ground like a falling barrier, revealing Richelieu, who was standing behind him with a face full of shock. When Richelieu saw Dean, he wanted to shout for help. However, the word pioneer in Dean's words made him swallow his cry for help back down. If Dean used other words to threaten him, he would completely ignore it. However, the existence of Pioneer was a high-level news in the inner wall. Almost no one in the outer wall knew about it. Even the name of the existence above the hunters was rarely known, let alone the top pioneer. The weight of these three words in his heart had already penetrated deep into his bone marrow. Just like when civilians heard nobles, they would subconsciously lower their voice. This was the awe and fear branded by the long-term rule. When he reacted, he saw the gray figure had already fallen. The smell of blood filled the hall. He stared at Dean in a daze. It was hard for him to believe that this terrifying teenager was the genius who came from a civilian background and had no background. Dean saw that Richelieu didn't shout. He indifferently said, "You are quite smart." Richelieu came back to his senses and his face darkened. He stared at Yi Futien and at the same time noticed the slender figure behind Yi Futien who was wearing a veil. His instincts told him that this silent, slender figure was even more dangerous. What do you want to do? If I remember correctly, I don't seem to have offended you. Do you want to kill me and become the Pope yourself? Richelieu narrowed his eyes. Dean shook off the sticky blood on his fingers. I want to be the Pope. I don't need to kill you. But the premise is that you have to cooperate with me. There was a trace of cold light in the depths of Richelieu's eyes. His wrinkled face was gloomy. Since things have come to this, why don't you take off the mask and we will talk, Mr. Dean? All right. Dean raised his hand and pinched his face. He quickly pulled out a layer of thin film and revealed his original appearance. He didn't care about his appearance being exposed. Since the Pope knows about the Dark Church, then you should be able to guess the purpose of me coming here to find you, right? Richelieu's face was gloomy. If I'm not wrong, you are really crazy. Do you know what you are doing? You want to control the Dark Church and control the underground forces of the outer wall. I believe that it won't take long for the monastery to get the news. They will send the strong to suppress you. Even if you have the support of the pioneers, you can't beat the monastery. He had some guesses when Dean said the words pioneers. With Dean's original physique, he had such a powerful strength in just a few months. It wasn't strange that he had the support of the pioneers. The only strange thing was, why did the pioneers do this? Did they want to use him as a chess piece to declare war on the monastery? Thoughts were surging in his mind. He was speculating a lot of information. If my enemies are like you, I think I will be very touched if they are in danger and can warmly consider for me. Dean's expression was calm as he glanced around. He took Aisha to a chair and sat down. Since you are so enthusiastic, how about passing your position to me? Richelieu saw that Dean was fearless, and he was secretly shocked. His face sank when he heard Dean's words. My position? Don't tell me that you don't just want the Dark Church, but also want to be the Pope? What's the difference? Dean asked back. Richelieu choked back his anger and said, I advise you not to let your imagination run wild. The position of pontiff is not something that I can pass to anyone I want. Even if I am willing to pass it to you, with your status and your history, how can you be worthy of the position? The church won't obey you, the elders won't obey you, civilians and nobles won't obey you. Not everyone can sit in the position of the Pope. I know, Dean indifferently said, so I have another candidate. This person is from the Holy Church. You just need to pass it to him. Richelieu was surprised. Who? Are you willing to give up the position? Dean didn't answer. Richelieu's face turned ugly. He didn't think that there would be a spy under his nose. Moreover, the spy was bought by an unknown kid with no background. It was a shame. He took a deep breath. Can you tell me why you're doing this? Is it because you were wronged and imprisoned? Is it because you want to retaliate against everyone? I think I am overestimating you by saying that I am retaliating. Dean said, I'm just doing what I want to do. As for hatred, you don't deserve it. Richelieu sighed softly and said, when a mystic sect sent you here to be the 9th district elder, I saw your identity information. I know that you have suffered a lot along the way. However, the God of Light has been watching over you to be where you are today. The God of Light will repay all the injustice you have suffered. You are still young. Do not let your eyes be blinded by hatred. Hatred will drag you into the abyss of sin. Hatred will only make people suffer and blind. His voice was full of compassion. The moment you let go of hatred is the moment you embrace the light. You will see that the world isn't as dirty as you imagined. Darkness will blind people, and they won't be able to see the future. You only need to let go of the hatred, and you'll be free. Dean quietly looked at him. In addition to the darkness, there is also strong light that blinds people. Do you think it is possible to use this trick on other fools? But do you think it is possible to use it on me? Richelieu was startled. You have sunk too deep. If everyone in the world is like you and is dominated by hatred, then the world will be destroyed. Do you think that a world dominated by killing can last long? Everyone will suffer setbacks, but when they encounter setbacks, they will hate the world. In the end, they will only destroy themselves. Even if you don't believe in God, you should at least believe in one truth. A world of love and peace is the most perfect world, right? Is that so? Dean asked. Richelieu stared at him. Isn't it? No. Dean calmly looked at him. Have you heard of Story? Richelieu was startled. Story. Once upon a time, there was a farmer who built a sheep pen filled with snow-white lambs. Dudeen slowly said, every lamb is happy and happy, although they fight for food, but there are no casualties. So every lamb can eat delicious food. The farmer was happy to see such a situation. But as the days passed, the lambs in the sheepfold grew bigger and fatter. The gentle farmer finally picked up the knife and slaughtered the lambs one by one and sold them to the meat market. The happy lambs didn't know what real fear was until that day came. Richelieu slowly frowned as he listened to Dean's narration. Then, in the second year, the farmer bought a group of lambs. Dean continued. The lambs lived happily in the pen, but one day the wolf came. The wolf rushed into the pen, and all the lambs were frightened. They desperately ran out of the pen to hide. When the farmer heard the news, he rushed to the pen and saw that several lambs were killed. The rest were scared and ran away. He was exasperated and hated the wolf. And those lambs that ran away also hated this wolf, because this wolf caused them to lose a stable home. Dean looked up at him and said, Do you hate this wolf? Richelieu's face was gloomy. He knew that Dean was asking him to make a choice. It wasn't a choice of hate, but a choice of position. He was silent for a long time before he said, Have you ever thought that even if the lambs knew their final fate, they would still hate the wolf? Oh, Dean looked at him with interest. Richelieu replied, Because in this pen, they can at least live a peaceful life until they grow old. But once they leave the pen, they will be in a precarious situation. Who knows when they might die of sickness or starvation. Compared to such a life, living in the pen is the greatest happiness, isn't it? Dean nodded slightly. You are right. The ending of the story is like this. In the end, the farmer killed the wolf and found the lambs. This is a happy story. Richelieu slightly opened his mouth. No one knew what he was going to say. But Dean's tone was gentle. We are people, not lambs. There's a big difference between people and lambs. People have dignity. Of course, there are many people who don't have dignity. But at least some people have dignity. They don't want to be lambs. So in real life, not everyone will hate the wolf. Dean looked at him. The existence of the dark church is like this, isn't it? Richelieu's lips slightly moved. He sighed. You are right, but it is because of this that it is sad. You also think it is sad. What I said is sad is not that some people are willing to be lambs. Richelieu shook his head and sighed. Those who think that they can see the world outside the pen and predict the behavior of the farmer are smart lambs. They know their end, so they don't want to live in peace. They like to stir up trouble. But they're just sheep. Even if they are angry, violent, what can they do? They will only hurt their own kind. They can't hurt even a hair of the farmer. So the smarter the person is, the more dangerous they are. The more rational they are, the more cold-blooded they are. When dealing with smart people, don't open your heart. Dean slowly nodded. You are right. The world is in the hands of smart people. It will also be destroyed in the hands of smart people. But if you don't want to be destroyed, you have to be that smart person. Richelieu said, Your idea is no different from those smart lambs. Dean was silent. After a long time, he slowly said, If I accept my fate, there will be no hope. If I don't try, how do I know that my horn won't pierce the farmer's neck? Richelieu deeply looked at him. But have you ever thought about how many of your kind will be hurt by your attempt? There are only two kinds of people in the world. Those who accept their fate are one kind, and those who don't accept their fate are the other. Dean looked at him coldly. On the chessboard, every chess piece has the role of killing the enemy. In that case, you should be prepared to be killed. You are completely blinded by the darkness. Richelieu sighed. Hatred will only lead to destruction. Your current behavior is like this. Even if you get the ruling power of the dark church and the holy church, what can you do? You have broken the stable order of the monastery in the outer wall. You have also broken the rules of the inner wall. Do you know how serious the consequences of breaking the rules are? You are rebelling against all the people of the giant wall of Sylvia. Chapter 619. Richelieu whispered, "What you said makes sense. But have you ever thought about how many people lost their lives because of you when you broke the rules? Don't you feel guilty? They are all ordinary people like you, just like you in the past, but now they have lost their lives because of the current you. You should say this to the people above you." Dean said, "Don't they preach universal love? In that case, I am willing to exchange positions with them." "You." Richelieu choked and couldn't speak. Dean said, "Tell me, which path do you want to choose?" Richelieu stared at him and said, "Before I make my choice, can we have a good talk?" "Yes." Dean didn't think much. Richelieu was relieved. It seemed that he was still a teenager and didn't have much experience. However, this gave him an opportunity. Since you have made up your mind and don't care about other people's lives, then you should care about your own life, right? Even if you get the position of Pope and control the Dark Church, I guess your next step will be to break the military of the outer wall and the magistrate. Is your purpose to rule the outer wall? Richelieu narrowed his eyes and stared into Dean's eyes. Dean didn't dodge. Yes. Richelieu was startled as he saw Dean admit it so easily. But what shocked him more was that his guess was actually true. This teenager was planning to control the entire outer wall. Richelieu calmed down. "You have been in contact with the monastery. You have the support of pioneers, so you should know what kind of power the inner wall has. In their eyes, the outer wall is just an abandoned place. It's not worth mentioning." "I know," Dean calmly said. "To put it simply, the gap between the outer wall and the inner wall is like the gap between the commercial district and the slums. I remember that the rich people in the commercial district call the slums garbage dump. The outer wall is the same in the eyes of the inner wall. Since you know, don't forget where I came from." Dean interrupted him. "I come from the junkyard, but I used to make all the rich people in the commercial district look up to me. All the rich people wanted to have a relationship with the aristocracy and respect me. I have broken the wall between the slums and the commercial district. Now I can break the wall that separates the inner wall and the outer wall." Richelieu was stunned. He suddenly thought of the incredible miracles that this young man had created, and he also thought of this young man's background. He was a lowly commoner, and he was even an abandoned child. But it was this person who lived in the dirt that stood in front of him, standing above the clouds. The facts were in front of him, and he couldn't deny it. After a moment, he thought of a new wording and slowly said, "I know you are very good, but your behavior this time is too reckless. It's like you are still in the slums, and you don't have any noble status in the commercial district. But you want to gather all the poor people to oppose the rich nobles in the commercial district. What do you think the outcome will be?" "You're right," Dean calmly said. "But what if the power of the poor people can destroy the army in the commercial district? What do you think the outcome will be?" Richelieu was stunned when he heard the last sentence. He woke up the next moment. There was a trace of surprise in his eyes. Could it be that there was more than one pioneer behind the teenager? Was there a big force in the inner wall who was ready to go to war with the monastery? He felt a sense of crisis as he thought of this. "You should feel lucky." "Lucky?" Richelieu frowned. Dean said, "I usually use my hands more than my mouth. But tonight, I didn't kill you, nor did I forcibly enslave you. Can you guess the reason why I talked with you?" Richelieu's expression changed slightly as he stared at him and said, "Because you know that if you kill me, you will not be able to obtain the position of Pope. The elders of the church will immediately recommend a new Pope, and they will recommend him according to his seniority, contribution, reputation, and so on. The person who is your spy might not have an advantage in these conditions, so you have to keep me alive so that I can give up my position to him." Dean didn't deny nor agree. "What else? You want to get some information from me?" Richelieu narrowed his eyes. "It's about the monastery. So you're not in a hurry to kill me?" Dean nodded slightly. "That's right." Richelieu's heart shivered. Didn't Dean's words mean that he denied the first point he said? If it was denied, then it meant that the person who was due Dian's reputation and contribution in the Holy Church wasn't as high as he had guessed. Thinking of this, several names emerged in his mind, but at the same time, another idea emerged. Perhaps this was Dean's smokescreen. He couldn't be so easily alienated by him. "Anything else?" Dian continued. Richelieu raised his eyebrows. Anything else? Dean shook his head. It seems that you are really old. Richelieu's face sank. Can you be direct? Dean raised a finger. The main reason is that I need your loyalty. Loyalty? Richelieu was taken aback. He looked at him in disbelief and said, You want me to pledge my loyalty to you? Yes, submit to me and be loyal to me. Richelieu thought that Dean meant abdication and didn't want to fight against him. He didn't expect that the boy wanted to take him under his command. He wanted the dignified leader of 2 churches to be loyal to a kid who was less than 20 years old. You don't deserve me to be loyal to you. Richelieu's face was gloomy. I can consider it if you just want the position of pontiff. But you want me to be loyal to you? It's wishful thinking. You could be the dog of the monastery. So why can't you be my dog? Dean looked at him as if it was a matter of course. Richelieu's expression darkened. Even if the mystic sect treats me well, they wouldn't dare to be so impudent. Don't think that you are holding me hostage. I don't want to expose my strength, but you have really angered me. At this point, his slightly hunched back slightly straightened, and a creaking sound came from his spine. His whole body exuded a strong aura. It was as if he was no longer the gentle old man draped in the gorgeous robes of the Pope, but the king of massacre who held blood in his hands. Dean's expression was very calm. Of course I know. As the chairman of the Dark Church, how can you suppress those little rascals who don't abide by the law? If I'm not wrong, then you should have reached the limit of a senior limitless. You should be stronger than what the monastery had expected. Richelieu was surprised. He didn't expect Dean to see through his cards. It was obvious that the boy had a strong perception. He snorted in his heart. The stronger the perception, the weaker Dean's fighting ability. The previous attack was estimated to be the strongest power Dean could muster. Since you know, then, I can't let you live. Richelieu was ready to step out. Dean suddenly said, Wait a minute. Richelieu looked at him coldly. Beg for mercy? Or, don't talk. Let me think. Dean interrupted him. He frowned and muttered to himself while counting his fingers, the limit of a high-level frontiersman. There should be a gap between him and a pioneer. He shouldn't be killed directly in one move. Speaking of this, he frowned slightly. Richelieu thought that Dean would say something. But when he heard Dean talking to himself, he was angry and a little scared because Dean's attitude was too calm. He couldn't see the slightest bit of bravado. But it was absolutely impossible to say that there was someone here who could kill him in one move. First of all, he was very sure that Dean's strength was not that of a pioneer. After all, even a big force like the Inner Wall could cultivate a large number of hunters, and even limitless, but to cultivate a pioneer was not something that could be done overnight. The masked woman next to him was even more unlikely. If she was the pioneer behind Dean, then it was not Dean's turn to talk to him. And from the woman's position and posture, it seemed that she was just a servant. Most importantly, Dean had held her hand. If there was no particularly close relationship, how could a pioneer allow others to touch her? He thought for a moment, but finally eliminated the distracting thoughts. He didn't say another word and suddenly made a move. When it was time to make a move, he never talked nonsense. Whoosh! His figure suddenly swept out, like a gorgeous golden light hitting Dean. At the same time, Dean had already raised his palm, the bell on his wrist shaking slightly. Chapter 620. A sudden gust of wind blew in the main hall, causing the curtains to flutter violently. A bolt of purple lightning suddenly appeared and collided with the golden light. With a loud bang, the golden light dissipated and revealed Richelieu's figure. His face was filled with shock. 2 fair, slender arms were wrapped around his shoulders. Their sharp fingernails pierced deep into his luxurious robe that was embroidered with golden threads, holding his arms in place. The powerful force of the arms pushed his body backwards at a rapid speed. With a bang, Richelieu's body hit the metal pillar on the edge of the bed. The entire pillar was dented, and his back was pressed hard against it. He was completely suppressed. Roar! A low growl that sounded like that of a ferocious beast came right at him. Richelieu could only see a pair of pure black eyes closing in on him, filled with a menacing coldness. It was as if he would be swallowed by an unknown force the very next moment. No, his mind instantly fell into despair. He could only watch in horror. Everything happened too quickly, and he was caught off guard. He had no time to react. Ding dong. There was a faint sound of a metal bell. The terrifying, oppressive aura stopped abruptly, and everything returned to normal. Only the stinging pain from his shoulder woke Richelieu up instantly. His first reaction was to attack immediately and use all his strength to repel the shadow of the shadow in front of him. But when he raised his arm slightly, he felt an indescribable pain coming from his arm. It was as if he had a cramp, and the pain was so intense that he instantly lost consciousness. His raised arm immediately froze. The pain made his eyes reveal a trace of unbearable agony. It wasn't that he couldn't endure pain, but the pain in his arm was completely beyond what he could bear. It was 10 times more intense than when his arm was cut off. Ding dong. The metal bell rang again, but it was different from the previous bell. This time, it shook a few times. With a whoosh, Richelieu felt a strong wind roll up in front of him. His body relaxed, and the pain in his shoulder instantly reduced. At the same time, the mysterious woman who was holding him back also withdrew. The speed of her departure was so fast that he could not see her clearly. It was as if she had taken away all the warmth from his body, and he felt an indescribable chill and palpitation. When he eagerly looked over, he saw that the mysterious woman had returned to Dean's side. She was still the same as before, like a servant or a close friend. She quietly stood beside the teenager without making any sound. It seemed that she had been standing there from beginning to end and had not moved at all. Richelieu's arm had already returned to normal. That strange, twisted pain had also returned to normal, so much so that he did not feel any pain at all. He looked at this young man with a face full of shock, as well as the mysterious woman beside him. The shock in his heart had reached an extreme level. He could never have imagined that this woman, who had not made a single sound like an assassin, would actually possess such terrifying power. With just one move, he was completely suppressed. Furthermore, if she had not retreated in time, he felt that he might have already died. This was a power that completely surpassed his, and it was far beyond his imagination. Just the most basic speed and strength made him unable to react or resist. "Mr. Speaker, can we have a good talk now?" Dean indifferently looked at him. Richelieu gradually recovered as he heard Dean's words. There was a trace of complex emotions in his eyes. The main reason why he was not in a hurry to call for help was that he was confident that he could deal with Dean with his own strength. After all, if he couldn't defeat an opponent, then there was no one in the entire outer wall who could. However, the brief exchange of blows just now had crushed all the confidence and confidence in his heart. "You have such a strong power. What else is there to talk about?" Richelieu slightly clenched his fist as he spoke in a bitter tone. Dean indifferently said, "I'm not like you. You are a respectable person. I can give you an equal opportunity to communicate with me." Richelieu was taken aback. He raised his head and looked at the young man. Seeing his calm expression, he suddenly felt an indescribable feeling. He smiled bitterly and said, "You can totally defeat me and force me to do whatever you want. Why bother saying so much to me?" Dean looked at him. If it was someone else asking this question, then it would be excusable. But isn't it a bit strange for the Pope to ask this question? Richelieu was stunned for a moment, but soon realized the meaning behind Dean's words. He suddenly understood why Dean was talking so much. He couldn't help but have a strange feeling in his heart. "Do you really want me to be loyal to you? Are you not willing?" Dean looked at him and quietly said, "Fighting can only convince people, but using words can convince people. Since ancient times, the power of words is often better than thousands of knives and swords. Unfortunately, all verbal communication needs to be based on the situation of equal fists. It's like a hot knife theory." Richelieu's heart shook. He had to say that Dean's words were very reasonable. At least at his age, he wouldn't be able to say such words. In addition to the strength of the boy, what was more terrifying was his heart and his wisdom. "You are really smart." After a moment of silence, he slowly said, "It seems that all of us have underestimated you in the past. A person who possesses power but only knows how to use it to subdue others is ultimately a boorish fellow. A person like you who possesses power but doesn't use it easily means that your understanding of power is deeper and further than ordinary people's. If this era was a little better, you would indeed be able to achieve something extraordinary. He spoke very seriously because these words were his true feelings. Dean calmly said, "You are flattering me. Since you look up to me, then it's time to make your choice. I hope you can make a smart choice." Richelieu was silent for a long time. "If I surrender to you, will you dare to use me? Aren't you afraid that I will pretend to surrender and then sell you out with false information?" "I have my own way," Dean indifferently said. Richelieu deeply looked at the boy. The boy's confidence made him feel a bit uncertain. At the same time, he felt a trace of jealousy and luck. He was jealous because the boy was so young but had a mind that didn't lose to him. Fortunately, such a person wasn't born in the same era as him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to live a stable life as the Pope for so many years. "I don't seem to have a choice. I am willing to be loyal to you as long as you are willing to believe me." Richelieu narrowed his eyes. "Very good." Dean clapped his hands. There was still no trace of a smile on his face. He calmly said, "Smart people are always cute. Now I will give you the first task. Prepare to abdicate the position of Pope. I need you to hand over the position of Pope to my confidant within 7 days." Richelieu's heart sank. "You don't believe me? I believe you." Dean said, "I believe that you will listen to me." Richelieu was speechless. After a while he said, "What will I get if I follow your orders? Will you get rid of me after I abdicate the position? You look down on me too much." Dean said, "I won't betray anyone who is loyal to me as long as they don't betray me. That's my rule. Also, if I really want the position of the Pope, I can still get it even if I kill you now. I only need to subdue all the elders in the Council of Elders and let them vote for one person. I believe that even if the person they choose is a nameless novice, he will be able to ascend to the throne of the Pope in one step, and there will be no objections from the commoners. After all, any resume and deeds can be shaped. As long as there is a credible person to testify, then it is the best evidence, isn't it?" Richelieu's face slightly changed. He felt a trace of coldness in his heart. He knew that Dean was right. If he subdued the entire elder group, then the existence of the Pope would be equivalent to nothing. Moreover, with Dean's strength, it was entirely possible to achieve this, but it would be a bit troublesome. "You will follow me in the near future. My great cause will be completed, and your position won't just be a little pope in the outer wall. You will even be the dean of the monastery." Dean threw out the sweet fruit. "But I will have to inconvenience you for a while. I hope you can understand and cooperate with me." Richelieu's face changed. He knew that there was no turning back once he took this step. He couldn't help but feel sad and at a loss. Once upon a time, he stood at the highest point and looked down upon the civilians and nobles of the outer wall. But now he was coerced and had no choice but to become a vassal. "I know." Richelieu sighed in his heart. There was a trace of helplessness and vicissitudes in his voice. Dean said, "You can no longer live here during the period of abdication. I will take you to a new place where all your instructions will be conveyed to the Holy Church." Richelieu was startled. He immediately understood that Dean was guarding against his secret betrayal. Dean wanted to isolate him from contact with other members of the Holy Church. Obviously, this was what Dean meant when he said, "I have my own ways." "I know." Richelieu didn't say anything. Dean nodded. "Now you're going to leave a handwritten order. The content of the order is that you encountered an assassin tonight and are seriously injured. You need to concentrate on recuperating." Encountered an assassin? When Richelieu heard this, he felt that Dean was bold enough to report his whereabouts. But soon he noticed the corpse on the ground. His face slightly changed. The assassin that Dean was talking about was most likely him. In this way, he could explain the smell and corpse left behind when he died. At the same time, he could also lay the groundwork for the succession of the throne. Chapter 621. "I know," Richelieu agreed. Dean gestured for him to leave. Richelieu understood and went to the other side of the hall. He took out a scroll from the drawer and started to write. He picked up the scroll and handed it to Dean for a look. Dean glanced at it. The content was roughly the same as what he had told him. There shouldn't be any secret code hidden in the text. He nodded. All right, get ready and leave with me. Seeing that things had come to this, Richelieu did not say anything more. He silently walked to the desk, opened a drawer, and took out some items, including a fine gold-plated goose feather pen from the pen holder. Dean looked at the scattered things he packed and pointed to one of them. What is this black box? It's the box that I used to store my knight badge when I was promoted to captain. I keep it with me as a souvenir. Richelieu said. Dean's eyes slowly swept through every item in the bag. There was an expensive quill, extremely white paper engraved with strange patterns, a badge engraved with strange patterns, a silver nail. There were all kinds of items. He looked at them one by one and quietly looked into Richelieu's eyes. Do you really want to take these things away? Richelieu had a bitter expression on his face as he said, In the near future, I probably won't be coming back here again. Although these things don't have any practical use, they were once my most precious possessions. For example, this little nail. Once, when I was on a mission, I fell into a trap and was framed by my comrade. This nail was shot out by him with a hidden arrow, and it pierced my chest. Luckily, it missed by just a little, or else I would have died on the spot. So all these years, I've always kept this nail by my side, as a constant reminder to myself. Dean stared into his eyes. Richelieu also didn't avoid Dean's eyes. After a moment, Dean slowly withdrew his eyes and nodded. Since you want to take them away, I will let you take them all. Richelieu looked relieved and sincerely said, Thank you. Dean didn't say anything more. He turned around and took Aisha's hand. They went to the window and waited for Richelieu. Richelieu quickly tied the bag and followed Dean. The night was dark. Dean let Richelieu lead the way down the mountain. Under the guidance of Richelieu, the two avoided all the gaps of the guards and smoothly came to the foot of the mountain. They didn't disturb any guards along the way. The entire heavily guarded mountain was like an uninhabited place for the three of them to go in and out. Richelieu did not take the opportunity to call for help. When Dean asked him to lead the way, he knew that it was a test given to him by Dean. But such a small test was naturally not difficult for him. He also knew that even if he alerted the guards, it would be difficult to stop Dean. Instead, he would be killed immediately. Dudien immediately took back the right to lead the way as he led Richelieu along the remote streets. A few hours later, Dudien and Richelieu returned to the castle by the Teza River. Sergei, Glenn, Nicholas, and others were shocked when they entered the castle. They didn't expect that the figure that they could only look at from afar would appear in such a close place. Dudien called Nicotine. How is the plantation? Nicholas looked at Richelieu, who was standing behind Dean. He responded, Master, the cultivation base has returned to normal. All the workers have been appeased. Is there a finished product? Dudien asked. Nicholas said respectfully, Yes, according to your orders, they're all stored in the warehouse. Dudien nodded. Go and get some. Nicotine was a little surprised and wanted to ask now. Yes, young master. After saying that, he turned around and quickly left, leading a fast horse and disappearing into the night. Richelieu frowned as he heard Dean's words. What kind of base is it? Dean called Noise after Nicotine left. Go to the 9th region and ask Hawkeye to get 2 sets of decomposition equipment. One set is for alchemists, and the other set is for potioneers. I want the best. Noise hesitated for a moment. Yes, young master. He had participated in the operation to suppress the Dark Church in the 12th region. He estimated that he wouldn't be expelled or hunted down if he returned to the 9th region. Dudien asked Glenn to steal some materials from the market after Noise left. He wrote a list of materials and gave it to her. Glenn's stealth ability and Black Weaver's magic mark ability were overkill for her to be a thief. Richelieu was puzzled as he looked at the orders issued by Dean. He felt an inexplicable crisis. It seemed that the youth was preparing for something big. Moreover, it had been a long time since the beginning. Even his plantation base, The hateful thing was that he didn't pay attention to the people around the youth. He didn't pay attention to his original subordinates after he was arrested in the inner wall. He was too careless. However, he couldn't be blamed for this. It wasn't that he didn't pay attention to Dean's subordinates for a period of time. However, Dean's subordinates were behaving very well. So he gradually relaxed his vigilance and didn't investigate further. After all, at that time, Dean had completely become a person under his control. As for his original men, they had long been insignificant characters, not worth mentioning. But who would have thought that in just a few short months, this young man had not only broken free from his control, but had even stepped on him? If he had been more vigilant towards this young man and thoroughly investigated the people around him, perhaps he would not have ended up like he did today. He shook his head and sighed. Dean glanced at Richelieu. Has Mr. Mel woken up? He has woken up but still won't say anything, Sergei replied. Dean nodded. Did the two little girls open their mouths? No, their mouths are too hard. I separated them in front of them, but they still won't open their mouths. They didn't even beg for mercy. Sergei smiled. Dean nodded. It means that they haven't reached their bottom line. You don't have to be tender towards them. Sergei scratched his head. I'm already very rough. I'm not talking about physical torture. Do you understand? Dean said in a teaching tone. Sergei immediately understood. I know. Go. I want to see them beg for mercy and lose all dignity, Dean said in a cold voice. Sergei nodded and went upstairs. Richelieu's face slightly changed as he heard Dean's words. He didn't expect that Dean was the one who massacred the Mel family. How much blood had this young boy's hands been stained with? His lips moved. You had destroyed the Mel family. Why do you want to torture them? Really? Dean glanced at him. Richelieu was startled. If I remember correctly, there's a young master of the Mel family called Mel. He seems to be a knight of light from the Holy Church. He is very young and promising. He wasn't at home on the night of the incident. Afterwards, he disappeared from the Holy Church. Do you have any trace of him? Dean indifferently asked. Richelieu shook his head. I didn't pay attention to these things. But if you want to check then, I'll send a letter back, and I'll give you the answer. No, Dean said. The giant wall is big, but it's not as big as the world. It's not difficult to find a person. Chapter 622. Dean took Richelieu to his room. It will inevitably arouse suspicions. Tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock at Martha's Square in the Western District. Show your face to clear the suspicion of the Holy Church. I know. Richelieu nodded. How long do you think it will take for the inner wall to notice the movement here? Dean asked. Richelieu had expected that Dean would ask this question. He already had an answer in his heart, but he pretended to think about it. If I go to Martha's Square tomorrow, then I should be able to hide for a while. There are 5 supervisors in the Holy Church who are responsible for passing messages to the monastery. Although the frequency of transmission isn't much, but if they know that I'm injured or missing then, they will certainly report to the monastery. Dean said in a profound tone, You should have said this before. Richelieu pretended not to understand and continued, Even if I manage to hide it from the 5 Dean supervisors, when the news of me passing on the throne comes out in 7 days, they will definitely inform the mystic sect immediately. By then, the mystic sect will definitely know about the situation here and send people to stop me because the passing on of the throne has always been decided by them. Hence, if it is possible, I feel that it is better to delay the passing of the throne. I'm really not being selfish. I have already pledged my loyalty to you and stand on the same side as you. You letting me pass on the throne is just to make you feel more at ease, but the price is too high. It's too late. Dean said in an indifferent tone, The time of passing won't change. If it is to be changed, then it should be in advance and not delayed. Richelieu frowned. Why are you in such a hurry? If you delay it for half a month, then you will have more time to control the outer wall. Why are you so nervous? If you don't believe me, then I'll listen to you. Dean looked at him and calmly said, There's an old saying called speed is the most important thing in war. Since we are at war with the monastery, then we have to seize the opportunity. We have to cut off all the hands and feet of the enemy before they can react. Will they be able to resist? Richelieu was stunned for a moment. Although he hadn't heard of this word, but he could roughly understand it. Indeed, Dean's current situation was that if he could control the outer wall as fast as possible, then he would have more time to deal with the monastery. If he continued to delay, then the chaos inside and outside would be inevitable. Do you have any relatives? Dean asked casually as he touched the wood carving on the table. Richelieu smiled. How can I have any relatives when I sit in this position? It's lonely at the top. Dean nodded, but didn't ask further. Seeing Dean's reaction, Richelieu was relieved. At this time, he heard Dean ask again, "Tell me the names and residences of the 5 proctors." Richelieu's expression changed. You're going to kill them? What I do is my business. Just cooperate with me. Dean said casually. Richelieu was silent for a moment, then said, I got it. Their names and positions are. He immediately reported the identity information of the 5 supervisors, including their expertise in fighting and other information to Dean. Dean wrote down, Do you have any channels to get God's marrow in the outer wall? There are, but not many of them. Moreover, they will be arrested and killed once they are detected by the military. Richelieu understood Dean's thoughts. You want to use the God's marrow to cultivate your men. It's going to be difficult to cultivate a warrior that surpasses the level of a hunter in a short period of time. Even if you manage to cultivate them, the forces of the inner wall can easily kill them. Suddenly, he remembered that Dean had the support of pioneers. Was it possible that Dean lacked God's marrow? Dean said, Give me these channels. I'll give you the code and location. Richelieu saw that Dean was determined to get the God's marrows, so he immediately told Dean about the channels he knew. These channels were small. His own channel was to directly apply for the God's marrows from the monastery through the Dean. So even if Dean knew about these secret channels, it wouldn't cause any loss to him. Noyce, Glenn, Nicotine, and others returned to the castle as they talked. Dean took out a bottle of ecstasy from his room. It was a high-end potion made by a master potion master. He poured 2 drops to Richelieu. Take a rest before dawn. I'll call you later. Richelieu felt dizzy as he smelled the scent of the bottle. He knew that Dean wanted him to faint and do something that he didn't want to see. He resisted in his heart, but looking at Dean's indifferent eyes, he braced himself, took the thing, opened his mouth, and fell down. After pouring it into his mouth, he did not swallow it immediately. Instead, he swallowed it with a mouthful of saliva, and his tongue hid the 2 drops of ice-cold liquid between his teeth. At this time, Dean patted his shoulder. How was the taste? This slap immediately made his back straighten, and something seemed to stir in his throat. With a gulp, he swallowed the ice-cold liquid that his tongue had pressed against and almost choked. His face turned red as he coughed. Dean shook his head and left. Richelieu looked up at Dean's back and felt his vision blurring. He saw 7 or 8 shadows of Dean's back, slanting and shaking. He shook his head hard and clenched his teeth, trying to stay awake, but his vision was getting blurrier and blurrier. Finally, he couldn't bear it anymore and fainted. Plop! Dean heard the sound of Richelieu falling to the ground as he left the room. He didn't look back, but went downstairs with Aisha. Master, these are the mulberry leaves and other plants that you asked me to grow. Nicotine took out bundles of plants and gave them to Dean. Dean nodded as he saw that the quality was good. He took the things and asked Noyce to move the 2 decomposing equipment to his basement to start refining. More than an hour passed in the blink of an eye. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. It was close to 5 o'clock in the morning. There was a faint light coming from the sky. Dean came out of the basement and went back to the room upstairs. Richelieu was still lying on the ground. His gorgeous robe was in close contact with the carpet. Dean helped him up. He picked up the syringe and rubbed Richelieu's wrinkled neck. He injected the white powder into Richelieu's neck. After a while, he took out another syringe and injected the light green liquid into Richelieu's neck. He picked up the teacup from the table and poured the cold tea on Richelieu's face. Chapter 6:23. He hugged his stomach and vomited, but nothing came out. After a bout of dry heaving, he suddenly felt countless ants and insects crawling up his throat. It was as if countless insect legs were scratching his throat, itching unbearably. Cough, cough, cough. He could not help but cough. Under the violent coughing, he felt a burning pain in his chest. Moreover, the itch in his throat did not subside. Instead, it became more and more unbearable, making him want to scratch. What did you do to me?" Richelieu gasped for breath and raised his red face to look at Dudien. But he saw that the boy was staring at him with a chilling gaze. "I didn't do anything. I just let you eat something delicious." Dean quietly looked at him. His tone was extremely flat. Richelieu's face changed. He was incomparably angry. He gritted his teeth and said, "Why are you doing this to me? Didn't you say that you completely trust me? I didn't betray you. I also hope that I can completely trust you. Unfortunately, you have disappointed me." Dudien indifferently said, "You should have told me about the matter regarding the proctor. You should have waited until I brought you out. Otherwise, it would be tantamount to forcing me to solve them. Today I hope you can remember that any trouble you create for me will not give you a chance to escape." Richelieu's face turned ugly. "I didn't mean that. It was just that the situation was urgent, and I didn't think about it. Moreover, you didn't ask." Dean waved his hand. "There is no need to explain. Whether you have such thoughts or not, this time is a warning to you. If you try to play tricks in the future, this punishment will last for the whole day." Richelieu was angry. His fingers slightly clenched and then slowly loosened. He suppressed the anger in his heart and was about to speak, but the strange itch in his throat was getting stronger and stronger. His lips could not help but tremble. With a low growl, he raised his hand and grabbed his throat, pressing his Adam's apple against his neck bone. The pressure and friction made the strange itch momentarily relieved. However, after a few seconds, the intense itch returned again, and it felt like it was spreading to his palm. He hurriedly let go of his hand. He was so itchy that he couldn't help but twist his head. Although his posture looked extremely strange, and with his previous image and dignity, he definitely wouldn't do such a self-destructive action. He couldn't care less at this moment. However, just twisting his neck could not completely suppress this strange itch. He could not help but raise his palm and pinch his throat again. He even had the urge to stab his fingers into his throat. He growled, breathing heavily. "The effect of this thing seems to be better than I expected. It seems that the radiation here is not completely useless." Dean looked at his unbearable appearance. He was both surprised and satisfied. He thought that he would have to inject a few more times to make him feel addicted. He didn't expect that just the first use would have such a great effect. All of this was obviously due to the soil of this era. The mulberry leaves and other addictive plant characteristics were much stronger than those of the old era. Richelieu desperately lowered his head and pressed his throat. He made a strange, low growling sound. His wrinkled face was red and sweating profusely. Dudien looked at the wall clock and quietly looked at the time. After a quarter of an hour, Richelieu finally couldn't bear it anymore. He panted and begged Dean, "Give me the antidote, please. I really didn't betray you. I really didn't." Dean looked at his pleading eyes. There was a trace of emotion in his heart. Even someone as strong as Richelieu couldn't resist this small plant. After a moment of silence, he slowly took out a small metal bottle from his pocket and said, "This is the antidote. Find a piece of paper, roll it up, and light the paper with fire. Inhale the burning smoke, and you will be able to relieve the itch." Richelieu's reddened eyes looked at the small metal bottle in Dean's hand. He couldn't wait to snatch it. After hearing Dean's words, he didn't have any other thoughts. He immediately looked around and found a pile of books on a desk. He quickly rushed to the desk and grabbed one of the books that he had seen before. He opened the book and pulled out a few pages. Because he was too anxious, his trembling hands accidentally tore the paper into pieces. He was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. He pulled out 2 more pages and returned to Dean. He gasped, "Antidote." Dean threw the metal bottle to him. Richelieu quickly took it and hurriedly opened the bottle. He poured out the contents of the bottle. It was a dark gray thing. It looked like smoked grass or ashes. He gasped as he poured these things on the paper. He quickly rolled it up according to Dean's instructions. After rolling it up, he suddenly thought of the lack of flame. He hurriedly looked around, but didn't see the flint or the match that had recently replaced the flint. The flame lit up. Dean lit a match and handed it to him. He indifferently said, "I hope you can remember this lesson." Seeing the glimmer of the match, Richelieu had an excited feeling as if he had seen the dawn in the darkness. He even felt a trace of gratitude towards Dean. He completely ignored Dean's words and quickly handed the rolled paper to the match. He watched the match ignite the paper. The flames slowly burned along the pen like paper. He had a feeling that he was about to be embraced by the light. Smoke floated from the roll of paper. He thought of Dean's words and tried to bite his own roll of paper and gently sucked it. A thick smoke was suddenly inhaled into his lungs. His tears almost flowed out. It was followed by a strong nausea and a violent cough. He coughed hard while patting his chest. He suddenly found that the strange itch on his throat had gradually disappeared. It was no longer so painful. It seems that there is really an antidote. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. To prevent the detoxification from not being thorough enough, he took another breath. Once again, he choked and tears flowed out his eyes. His chest felt like it was burning, but this burning pain was like heaven compared to the unbearable itch from before. Moreover, he slowly felt that his body was somewhat relaxed and became light as a feather. Don't swallow it all. Use your throat to suck it and then spit it out. Dean instructed. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.